It is true.
There's a death. I don't know what's wrong with my lights today. I've tried everything. It's just...
Really?
Yeah. I've got the same lights on as always. It's just
like the auto contrast on your camera or something?
No, I don't have auto contrast on my camera. Let's look at my camera.
Notification came through. Am I going to get an email one too? Let's see. Email. Oh, got the email one.
You know what? I bet it's my shirt. This happens.
Oh, yeah. I have that problem with clericals. My clericals throw it off because it's black, and it's trying to get the contrast right for the clerical.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, but you wear your white hoodie.
It does that with my white hoodie too, though. It'll kind of go in and out.
Okay.
When I move. So, and it's also kind of overcast today. A little sunny, a little overcast. The whole thing is kind of dusky.
I wonder if...
more in melody.
Well, look, I don't think anyone has any illusion that we're not in the same room.
I know. I'm just pointing that out if anybody's like...
Even though we do a pretty good job faking it, I think, on the podcast.
Well, see, what's happening is Gillespie's in the light and I'm in the dark. It's a metaphor.
Is it?
It's the duality of human nature and the dichotomy of existence.
Hope everyone is well. Well, we were talking about that before we went on.
Actually, I'm sick, but no, we're all well.
Oh, no.
A summer cold.
I was actually going to talk about Eric Brown. Oh, no, he's here.
Brown and Brown.
So can we talk about him if he's here? Or
Brown? Is that like a double wipe?
Well, they live near each other now.
Brown and Brown live near each other?
Yeah, Eric and his father. Are you? I think they're even in the same circuit, maybe. Yeah, because his dad took Dave Jules' old call.
Oh, okay, cool.
Down
if
the street.
Nebraska were a person, it'd be the Brown family. How about that?
We can insult them because they're here. Oh, there you go.
I know they're present, so.
Yeah, because Eric
I'd insult them if they weren't here, but it's more fun to insult people to their face.
He's been trolling somebody on Twitter, and it's I wouldn't say it's beautiful. It's actually kind of ugly, as Twitter is in general. But it actually ties in with our show from last week. So
cool.
Well, but we don't have to talk about that.
And get rolling here.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's Friday.
I'm rolling. Where's my
dots? Morning, Paul.
Where's my war chant? Oh, there it is. Get my act together here.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. This is the Banned Books Podcast, episode number 265. We love Flannery O'Connor, and we are your hosts, Christopher Gillespie.
Chillin' and willin', maxin' and relaxin'. I am not allergic to coffee. I'll tell you that.
I'm Donovan Riley. If I were allergic to coffee, I might consider alternative means of life.
But I am allergic to a lot of other things in the air, apparently.
What do I want to say? Are the leaves turning where you're at? Starting at least? No. We've got a couple trees.
No.
Some of the fruit trees are turning yellow.
No, I think we had a bad pollen year, but not a bad mosquito year. So I don't think it's been wet enough.
Mosquito year because I planted 5 pounds of red clover and thyme in my yard, and it drives them away.
What I mean, a great mosquito year, as in a great number of them.
That's what I mean too. We drove them all out.
It wasn't wet enough here. So.
We had a quote-unquote drought-like conditions in July.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you couldn't burn stuff.
Sure. Exactly.
Yeah. Under some provision.
Yeah, that and the county sending me a letter telling me not to water my trees or my bushes or my garden or my plants also.
Were they mandates?
They were not mandates. They were requests that were strongly worded. So I prayed, and then 2 days later it rained for 2 weeks.
It's like my village is like, oh, these trees are getting in the way. And I want to just write them back and say, well, then cut them down.
Weird.
But it's your responsibility because they're overhanging the road.
No, we need to pass a law about the trees.
Like, if they're getting in your way, just lop them off. It's fine.
You may be a statist if your solution to every problem is, we need to pass a law about this. You ever notice that there is no other option anymore other than just, well, we got to go to the council, the township, the state legislature, the Fed, and they got to make a law about this.
I'm kind of convinced. I don't know about this, but you're not really free unless you think you're free.
Well, according to Epictetus, that's true.
Okay, so there you go.
You only have freedom over what is within your control, which is your thoughts and how you respond to external stimuli.
Yeah.
That's all.
So, I mean, we call it like the illusion of control. I mean, there is times where you think you're in control of things you aren't, right? So that's fake. But, it's like, well, we don't have our freedoms anymore. I'm like, why
You
not?
never did. You never did.
Well,
you are by nature, according to Scripture anyways, you are by nature slavish.
mm,
And you want to be enslaved by an authority figure. And I can prove that from both Scripture and history.
give us a king like the nations around
Right.
us.
I mean,
We
that's what
already have a
everyone's
king.
demanding now, of course, and a lot of people are predicting that at least within the next 2 presidencies, we're essentially going to, quote unquote, elect an authoritarian dictator-like figure who's going to offer to pull us out of this implosion, this destruction, this disintegration.
Can we at least call it a
of
monarch
civilization.
just so I feel better about it?
No, we'll just call him a reality TV star or not a politician.
Brondo, it's with electrolytes.
Exactly. It's got electrolytes in it.
Where are the
don't know
plants
that-
all dying? It has.
Idiocracy, I think, is available to watch for free on YouTube now.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So if you haven't watched Idiocracy, you'll either get it or you won't. But it bombed when it came out.
I know.
No one thought it was funny. And now, of course, Mike Judge was on Rogan like a year ago or so, and they were talking about it. And he's like, yeah, I made it as again, it's just satire of culture in the late 90s. I didn't think it was going to come true. But I
This
think
is
it's
always
funny
the
that
problem.
people are
Yeah.
like, The Rock should run for president. I'm like, have you not watched Idiocracy?
I know.
Where an actual professional wrestler does become the president of the United States and only talks in sound bites? It's what plants crave, exactly.
It's like, why are they dying? When did the
I don't
giant
think I'm supposed to
Costco?
be here.
Yes.
I'm in the wrong line. Well, then get out of here. Really? He just walks out of the prison.
Yeah. All right, so I'm looking here to see.
I just like that
Idiocracy.
StreamYard has, for those of you who aren't on the live stream and aren't aware, StreamYard has this giant blue box in the middle of my screen that says, "You are in the show. Everyone can see and hear you."
That's a good
I feel like
reminder.
every morning when I turn my phone on, it should just tell me that. We're listening and we can see and hear everything you're saying.
Stars Prime Video
Cool. There you go.
for streaming. So I'll link to that.
Good.
You can pay for it too. You should pay for things too.
Well, you can go on Amazon Prime if you have it, and you can sign up for like a week's free.
Yeah, I think you can still get the.
That's how I watch
The
American
DVD.
Gods.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Boy, 4K DVDs have really gone down in price. I hadn't really looked at that in a while, and then last night I was looking at Predator in 4K. It's $15.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Not day of, but later on. Yeah, they drop.
Right. Yeah, it's quite remarkable.
Well, because nobody wants physical inventory. It's age-old problem.
Right.
If you can't turn it, you gotta flip it.
Right. You and I want it for when the internet goes out, but
Correct.
yeah,
I've ripped all mine, so I've got 28 terabytes of
There we go.
Blu-rays.
you're ready.
Hopefully, as long as the drive's not, I mean, they're all backed up, but it's still like, yeah.
It's all good.
All right, what were we actually going to talk about today?
Flannery O'Connor.
Again.
Try and wrap up Revelation, which is a short story. I apologize for last episode. I, at least, wasn't completely on the ball and made numerous errors, actually, in my memory work. When she died, where it was written at. And
That part, yeah.
I just wasn't on the ball. I wasn't tracking with your conversation.
You didn't train
No, I didn't.
that day.
No, I hadn't. And so I was, No, I was just lethargic mentally. It wasn't
I've had this problem, and I don't know what it is, but like the momentary short circuiting, where the neurons aren't firing quite right, and like I say the wrong word, or I can't even get the word out. It's very strange. I don't know.
Has
Maybe
lots
it's
to do with
environmental.
how many times the dogs get me up in the middle of the night. That'll have.
Well, I've been having that problem. Yes, of course.
So there's that. Yeah, we've been
Well, and I
tinkering
think
with our dogs. Let's call it vitamins that we give them at night so they sleep better.
Right.
All natural, all organic, nothing terrible. But
referring to the last episode, part one, I think I wanted to deal with some of the subject matter in a different way than you did. At least my reflection of it.
100%. I think, to your point, when I'm tired or lethargic, I tend to just go straight theology because it's a safe lane for me to drive in. I don't have to think, do heavy lifting.
Because you've internalized it, yeah.
Yeah, but I think for us, building bridges for listeners in particular, building bridges between culture, philosophy, and theology, which is really the whole trajectory of reading literature rather than just hard theology, is sussing out, like we talked about with Flannery O'Connor in the last episode, sussing out the paradoxes and also diving deep into, well, what does this name mean? Or what's the subtext here? Or what is she really driving at, setting up protagonists and antagonists in this way?
Well, and I think the one topic that, at least today, maybe not our generation, because I think we were better equipped in this, but the current generation is just ill-equipped to discuss, I want to say objectively, I mean, I don't know if you can be purely objective about race and culture in Southern
100%.
America, you
Right.
know.
Go listen to Tom McDonald, for example.
Right. I mean, we're so like, I guess it's programmed, right? I mean, we're programmed into this like idea that, and well, here's the word systematic, I think is one of the culprits of this, because it is possible that things have been systematized,
Right,
so
but that,
meaning they're largely
right.
pervasive, but that doesn't mean they're universal. But that's how we're treating it.
The Marxist ethic, because it's Marx
Correct.
who coins these categories, comes up with these categories, these systems.
They're tools, and they become tools.
Exactly.
For
You and
social
I were
change.
raised to
Yeah.
believe that you judge a person by the content of their character, not the color of their skin.
Thank you,
And
MLK Jr. Yeah.
somewhere between there and our children and children of the tail end of the Gen Xers, it's now everything's about race, which again is a part of the neo-Marxist movement and the
Well, it's
color
worse than that.
revolution.
Everyone's a racist.
Exactly. That's what I mean, is that the system, quote unquote system, has said everybody is a racist and we're going to make everything about race, which you and I warned everybody about 2 years ago that this was coming.
After COVID, yeah, post-COVID, it would be the next thing.
During it, we said this is all a setup. And then we, again, with the George Floyd riots and
Oh,
everything
that's
that came
right.
out of
Yeah.
that, we warned everybody this is a part of this this is an invasion.
It's a
by
color
the Chinese
revolution.
Communist government. It's the color revolution. We've already seen this. It's the same thing now where people are finally waking up to the fentanyl crisis in this country and how it's coming into the country and who is providing the Mexican cartels with this fentanyl. It's coming
Wait a
straight
minute.
out of China.
None of those topics were mentioned in the speech last night that are the things that are dividing us.
Weird.
Huh.
Right. 110,000 people overdosed from fentanyl last year and died.
More than COVID.
More than by a long shot. And by the way, more than all of the other drug overdoses.
That's true too.
And so fentanyl is coming out of China.
You saw the
China-
rainbow fentanyl.
Right. Right.
It's like now you know who they're marketing to,
But where
right?
are they getting the fentanyl from?
China through Mexico.
But where is China getting it from? Starts
Afghanistan?
with an A, ends with a stand. Exactly.
What?
Right.
Wait a
We'll
minute.
never talk about
Are you
that.
saying that we gave up Afghanistan so that China could have it, so that they could traffic the stuff through?
That's going to undermine our country, just like
and then we
did
would
with
open the
Central America in the
border
80s,
so that it could get from Mexico into the country.
just
without,
like we did with Central America in the 80s. Yes.
That's not a. I mean, it is a theory, but this is what we do. We theorize, and then
Is it
we
a theory?
look for evidence.
When it's the data makes it factually true.
Well, not that it's happening. I think that's factually
Right.
true.
No, it's happening for sure.
As
And
to
the drug
who's
cartels-
responsible, that
No,
might be a
the
little
drug
bit
cartels
harder.
are very open about it.
Oh,
Like,
it's
this
where
isn't
they get
a
stuff.
mystery. Like, everybody knows where the drug cartels are getting their fentanyl from because they're making deals with the Chinese Communist Party. And the Chinese Communist Party isn't hiding it either.
Why would they need to?
That's my point, is that they don't need to hide it because we don't care.
We're not going to do anything about it.
It's not reported on the news, and therefore we don't see it. And we
Yeah.
lack the curiosity. Because I have family in Mexico, and I'm going to Mexico in October for a couple of weeks, I'm hyper aware of what's happening. Not only along the border on the Mexican
I was
side of
wondering
things,
about
but how
that.
the
I
cartels
mean,
are moving.
I mean, there's like major drug wars happening right
There
across
are
the
in
border
Tijuana
from San
right now.
Diego.
Again,
Yeah.
yes. It's ridiculous. Every
I
time
mean, well, they have all
yeah.
those tunneling, so
No,
they go-
they're just taking it back and forth across the board. It's all out in the open. The tunnels are just a distraction.
yeah.
No, it's a very open pipeline. Talk to people in the DEA. Talk to people on both sides of the border who are
Right, but don't we have
working
like a
this.
Navy shipyard right there? I mean, you think like the military would be a never mind.
Not their purview.
Eh. Well, because it's
So-
money, right? I mean, because there's money involved.
Money
as long
and
as
power.
there's money and power
And the
involved,
Mexican
yeah.
cartels have more money and more armament than most countries, actually.
This is not just MS-13 or something.
No. They have surface-to-air missiles. They have tanks. They have
Mhm.
Black Hawk helicopters. No, the cartels are, well, they're almost as well armed as the Taliban in Afghanistan.
Right, I saw their parade with all the
Mhm.
U.S. armaments.
Right. That's the world we live in, but those are real problems that require real solutions versus the key on a keyboard activism that this generation is becoming known for.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to take up a cause when you don't have to get arrested or beaten by police or attacked by dogs or have to put your life on the line to do something significant to change the world. And as a consequence, then, yeah, you don't have to take things seriously because you're only offended by things that don't affect you, such
Well,
as racism. Is
Right,
there
and that's what I
racism
was
in
gonna
America? Yeah, of course there is.
Yeah.
Is
right.
it as widespread as the media makes it sound? Absolutely not.
Well, is it even actually the same as what
No.
the media is presenting?
No, that's a cartoon.
Right. Right. I mean, I just pointed this out. I mean, we've had this occasion. Like, we'll go to a store and our kids will see some
Yeah.
people that look different,
Yeah,
and they'll describe
exactly.
them. You know,
Right.
like, was that racism?
No.
No, it's just categorization. Or just like,
Right.
well, those people have different color skin than I do.
Right.
Okay. Hey,
Exactly. Why?
well, that's observant. Or that person's
Exactly.
fat, or that person's, I mean, you could do it with any
Tall or
kind of
whatever.
attributes.
Yeah, anything. Yeah. Why is that person driving around in a wheelchair?
Well, so then you could have the conversation, say, well, they or their ancestors were from this part of the
this is
world.
where they're
And,
from. Exactly.
yeah.
And
like-
as Christians, we tend to actually believe that everybody came from the same parents. So therefore, in the end, racism is stupid.
Well, I read in an article. It was the same woman 500,000 years ago in Africa
Right.
because of mitochondrial DNA.
Yeah, we all evolved from fungi.
So that was the conversation I was trying to have.
Right,
I don't know
and
what conversation you were trying to have.
I was trying to not have one. My brain was like, stick to the theology, stick to the text, don't wander.
Right, but and then I hashed it out in the sermon actually on Sunday. So
There we go,
I guess
see?
you can go listen to that.
I apologize to the members of your congregation who are listening to this.
No, just that because we had the
Mm-hmm.
the tax collector and the Pharisee.
Right.
It's like what really distinguishes them.
You know what's great, since you brought it up, and it just struck me as you brought it up, the great thing is that, Robert Capon describes in his Parables book that the Jewish tax collectors were these kind of mafia-style thug enforcers
Yep.
who walked around with Roman soldiers, right, to basically extort money from you, which
Yeah.
is exactly the system that we're setting up now.
Correct.
So we don't even have to try and stretch.
I
reach this
had
text.
to hold my tongue. I was like, oh, a tax collector. Oh, like in one of the new 87,000. I was like, no, I don't need to put that in the sermon.
Yeah.
It's
You
just
don't
a
need an
distraction.
assault weapon, but IRS agents do.
Right. So they're both Jews. So that doesn't say. So it's not really a race thing, except they
No.
are distinguished. I mean,
Yes.
and Jesus distinguishes them.
Sure.
But what's the distinguishing thing?
It's a caste system.
The only thing that's different between them is not that they're both trying to get ahead or they're both trying to make a name for themselves or, whatever. And they're both sellouts in a different kind of way anyway, right? And you could throw race in there if you wanted to,
Sure.
as another way to kind of distinguish between them. But that's not what it's about, right?
We'll use any excuse to differentiate ourselves and make ourselves better.
That's my point, right?
I'm watching this new show on Netflix called Cleo. It's a German show, Kleo.
Oh man,
And
it
it's-
got panned on Rotten Tomatoes, so I figure I should watch it.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. Yeah, because she's a strong, intelligent female antagonist with significant flaws, and the only way I can do it's like the Terminal List, actually.
She's not like the attorney at law that's green.
No,
Oh,
she has she actually talks and acts like a human being, but it's like the Terminal List meets Amelie. Remember Amelie, that French film from back in the day?
This sounds like
Audrey Tautou.
Not
she's got-
Atomic Blonde or something, but
No, it's
I don't
nothing like that. It's just it's set in Germany in 1989 when the wall comes down. So you have that dynamic is the subtext for the whole series. Is the wall came down, you have these East German assassin spies, and they're Stasi, and now they don't know what to do with themselves. The KGB, they don't know what to do anymore.
How do you spell it? Is that with a K or-
Kleo?
Okay, I got it.
And she's got this certain naivety to her character, like Amelie, where she does stuff that you're like, oh, wow, okay. So she's childlike, like Amelie, but she's got a Terminal List, like the show.
Because she's been trained up from her youth for this.
Well, because she's trying to get revenge for something that was done to her that she doesn't. She's trying to find out why something was done to her.
Okay.
She was
All
betrayed
right.
by the state,
Okay.
and she was betrayed by her people. And she's an East German, down with the cause, Stasi assassin. And she ends up going to prison, and there's all these other things that happen that really hyper-motivate her to get revenge. And then when the wall comes down, the Russians kicked all their political prisoners out of prison and went, get out. And then the rest of the series is her trying to figure out this mystery of like, why did she go to jail? Who was responsible for all this? The walls come down, so it's very difficult to find these people because everyone fled
Yeah.
to get
right.
out. And so it's a compelling show in that sense. And it's German, so it's done well. And it doesn't do what an American show would do with these characters, which is probably why they hate it.
Yeah, I
Criticize.
wondered about that. I didn't. I was going to go look at Rotten Tomatoes on it, but yeah.
Did you ever watch Dark? That other German show
I did.
that
Yeah.
I love? Right. And now
Anne wants to watch it again.
It took a while for that show to really build up because it was world building, right? So it was like 3 or 4 episodes before you even had a clue what was going on. Whereas in American shows, you have to like immediately, there's got to be an exposition dump so I know everything that's happening and why I care about these characters and why this is happening. It's like just constant exposition dump, right? Whereas with German shows, for example, and this is true in
it's really, I mean, it's not even season 1. I mean,
no,
ultimately.
Really. Like you get to the end of season 1, you're like, okay, I need at least 12 more episodes now. Like I finally get what's going on.
And then
you're just gonna make me wait. It's like with Norwegian detective films or shows. It takes sometimes 5 or 6 episodes for you to catch up to speed on what's happening because they're taking their time. You're getting invested. They're developing the narrative. Versus, again, in American detective shows, it's like everything's got to be wrapped up and ready to go by the end of the first episode.
So what was the connection to?
We're too hyperactive intellectually and we're too juvenile. And therefore, we can't just think and be thoughtful and allow things to happen. We have to force everything down other people's throats. And therefore, we can't just have a broad conversation about such as race.
Right.
So we'll just label everybody according to a certain category and go like, that's what you are.
Well, this came out because of the use of the language from Mrs. Turpin.
Hey, Dustin, on the live stream, we were literally just talking about dark when you...
Yeah, they're 30, I think they're 30 to 60 seconds behind us. So.
Oh, okay. All right.
No, with Mrs. Turpin, you know, that she's doing all that kind of categorization.
Exactly.
And she's distinguishing and she's maybe even stereotyping, I guess, to some degree, you know, based off of race.
Well, again,
kind of.
It's a caste system.
Except the messenger boy from the pharmacy, like, she doesn't even... I mean, she had kind of more respect for him than anybody else in the room. Well,
but remember she said, if Jesus gave me a choice between being white trash or being black, I'd choose black, but only if I was a well-educated, like, quote-unquote, good black person, not like white trashy black person. So she's got a whole caste system in her head.
Right.
And so the kid that comes in carrying the pharmaceuticals, like, he's not white trashy black because he's got a job and he's well-dressed, remember? And he's he talks. And it's like nowadays when someone says, well, you know, Barack Obama, he's so well-spoken and he's an intellectual. And historically, those have been racist terms used to describe black people who, again, the racist assumption is black people are dumb and they're subhuman and, you know, therefore they can't learn like us. So to say that a black person is eloquent, articulate, or intelligent, well, that was racist language. That was code in Flannery O'Connor's era. So when Obama was running for president and those words were bandied about, people bristled at that. It's like, and it's
well,
like,
he did come from aristocracy of a sort.
Well, he did, and he was well educated.
Right. Was he Harvard? I think. Right.
Something like that. But the point was that the people that were saying it, one, were reading off a teleprompter. They were reading from a script, and number two, they're not living in the 1950s and 60s. The connotation is different.
Right.
But you can't allow the language to breathe. You can't just give someone a compliment without having someone jump up on the internet and go, hey, wait a minute. That used to be code for black person, not smart, subhuman, et cetera, et cetera. So you can't use those terms to describe somebody who's black anymore. It's like, well, what if he is articulate and well-spoken and intelligent? What other words do I use? Do I have to carry around like a rogue's thesaurus with me everywhere I go?
Well, words don't have meaning, and they change meaning all the time.
Well, again, like we talked about on the last episode, and Louis C.K. brings this up in I think, Chewed Up, one of his first specials. When you say the N-word, like as a newscaster, you say the N-word, you put responsibility on me now because I know what that word is that you're saying. And now it's
off your conscience, but now it's on mine.
Now it's on my conscience. And now I have to walk around all day with that word in my head. And
the four-letter word, the F word. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's like, just say it. We all know what you're saying.
Or don't say it.
Or don't say it at all, because by saying the N-word, you're acting like a child. And like you said, just don't say it. Say black folks.
What was this? It's Huck Finn, right? That's one of the reasons why that was excluded from a lot of curriculum in libraries. Yeah.
Right. It's like, just his name is Jim.
And just to say Jim. It's kind of cultural, that seems lazy too, though. Because it's more than cultural, you know, or maybe historical, I guess.
It's a designation. This is who again, nobody called him Cracker Huck, right? Like, he's not Cracker Huck.
Oh, I bet you there's a parody where it's the opposite perspective.
Sure.
I wonder if there
again,
is.
it's a caste system, and within that system there are grades of human beings. I saw this in Guadalajara. In the old government offices, they had posters on the wall, painted onto the walls, And there
Right.
were 24 to 28 different colors of people. And depending on your color, you were like one was Castilian Spanish, like your pure blood. And then way at the bottom was usually like some black slave from the Caribbean who was crossbred with some native Mexican. And depending on what your skin color was, those were your privileges and rights.
Mm.
So if you were, in the top 5, you had a lot of privileges and rights. And if you were in the bottom 5, well, sorry, that's the way it goes.
So I think what was remarkable, anyway, in my reading last time, was that the author, Flannery, doesn't really seem to be holding judgment against Mrs. Turpin.
No, she uses those adjectives: cheerful, happy, grateful.
I mean, she's just a normal person, is how she's written,
right?
And but when we come to it now, it's like,
correct.
This woman is terrible. She's can't make it.
Cringy.
Yeah, right.
Well, and she describes her this way too, right? She's fat. She says that she's fat. She has black eyes. She's very large for a black woman, and she's proud of her skin complexion because it's pure, and she's never had blemishes or pimples or zits.
Right.
Everything about her represents a kind of like bloated, lumbering, ignorant sector of society. I think that's what Flannery wants us to see.
Okay.
Same thing with Claude. He's like, you described Claude.
Yeah, definitely with Claude.
He's a Claude. He's bald. Right. He doesn't speak for himself. He's got an ulcer on his leg because he got kicked by one of the farm animals. And then the white trash people describing their shoes, the paper ribbon because she can't afford cloth. The fact that the one woman's dress is made out of potato sacks or chicken feed sacks.
So do you think O'Connor's like intentionally, almost like baiting us to bring judgment against
she
all these people?
Paradox. Yeah, absolutely.
Against everybody in the room.
It's like a one-act play almost. Just the first part of the story because it's all in the one office and it's a very small space. They're all shoved into together, and we immediately make judgments about the secretary, the nurse, the doctor, the girl reading the human behavior book, her grandmother, her mother, the little boy.
So if you want to be theological, which you wanted to be more, this is revealing the character of the heart and the way that we bring judgment upon everyone except 100%. For ourselves. So
I texted you about this last week, didn't I?
Did you?
For those of you who don't know, the actor Shia LaBeouf, who got Me Too'd, rightfully so, he admits to all of it.
Oh yeah.
He hit rock bottom in his addiction, and he ended up not only joining AA and going to rehab, but he is now a devout Roman Catholic who's actually making a movie about Padre Pia, a very famous Roman Catholic priest. And he's done a number of interviews with a Roman Catholic bishop about his faith and coming to faith. But
that
also
was with Barron. I'll link to it
Bishop
in the show
Barron,
notes.
right. But also he did a great podcast with John Barenthal, who he acted with in the movie Fury.
Which went up, yesterday, right? So
something like that. Where he does exactly what you do in AA, which is you take a fearless moral inventory, and then you are rigorously honest about your addiction and everything that you did as a consequence. And, of course, working the 11th and 12th steps, you're of service to not only other addicts in recovery, but the general population at large. That's kind of the point, is that what addiction does is it turns you in on yourself so that you only care about what feeds your addiction. You don't care about people's feelings. You don't care about what people think. You don't care about showing up for work on time. You don't care about anything.
So one of my questions is, before you get to your next part, is that sounds like it describes most people.
It does.
I mean, there's those who are unwilling to recognize their addiction. But that addiction, that's a very broad experience.
It is a broad experience, except for one small caveat.
Okay.
An addict does all the regular things. It's just turned up to 11.
Okay. There you go.
Right. You're selfish, and you acknowledge, I'm selfish. I'm a selfish person. But you would never hold a knife to your wife's throat because she undercooked your steak. Right?
So truly extreme.
100%.
Yeah.
So, for example, everybody falls in love when they're young. Everybody thinks they found their soulmate. If you're fortunate, you have a high school sweetheart or a college sweetheart. It's the love of your life.
Or you just keep getting a new one, like Leonardo DiCaprio.
Right. Well, there's that part. But the point is this, that when you're young, you fall in love, and that person that you fall in love with is everything to you. And you start to plan your future and your hope, and everything is wrapped up in this person.
Yeah.
And because you're young and naive, you don't recognize how destructive and detrimental this is to both of you, especially if you break up. I had a nervous breakdown when I was 19 because of this. Now, you grow older, and hopefully you learn from this. Addicts keep repeating the same cycle of behavior over and over and over and over and over again. So that living with me when I'm in my full-blown addiction, when I'm full-blown, is like riding the world's most dangerous roller coaster. Because when I'm high, everything is the best it's ever been. And when I'm low, I'm suicidal. And I'm going to take everybody with me.
That also sounds like American cultural life in general, too.
It does. And that's what I mean, though, is that
to one extreme to the other. Just
for
like
an addict, everything is just turned up all the time to blast. And everything's a drug. Everybody's a drug to you. Women are a drug. Drugs are a drug. Everything you do it's feeding that addictive personality, within you, feeding the drug. And so he talks about all this, and he's very open and honest about it.
And that's in the Barenthal?
Yeah, it's in the Real Ones Barenthal podcast.
I've got it linked in the show notes.
And Barenthal himself is in recovery, and he's talked about that on other podcasts before too, about his life.
You can tell watching Punisher, that's part of his life.
No, he almost went to jail, like federal prison jail, while he was on the like right before he got the job on The Walking Dead, or he had gotten the job and then went to jail, and he's like,
I didn't even think about his role on Walking Dead.
He's not really acting, and he just grew up rough. He grew up rough, and he grew up hard. But I highly recommend Real Ones because he interviews a whole bunch of people that normally don't end up on podcasts, and they all have great stories to tell because they're real. And so Shia goes on and he talks about his recovery. He talks about his faith. He talks about the things that he did. And he's got a daughter now. And why every day then? Like he says, my daughter is the perfect parole officer. Because every single day, I have to remember that someday she's going to be old enough to go on the internet and look her daddy up on the internet. And she's going to read all this horrible stuff.
Yeah.
And so I have a choice. I can either change so that when she sees that, she goes, well, that's not my dad anymore. I've never known that man. Or she can look at me and go, you're a monster. And all I have to blame is myself. And it's the same, again, that's the addictive personality is you lie to yourself constantly. You lie to everybody constantly. You're always looking for the wiggle room. You're always looking for your angle. It's like being a fighter. You're always looking for the angle. You're always trying to get people emotional and spun up so that it's easy to control and manipulate them because you're going for that knockout. It's just that with the addict, it's always that angle of you're my drug, you're my anesthesia, you're my medication. And if you don't serve that purpose, you're as good as dead to me. And depending on, how deep in addiction you are, you will actually kill people or facilitate the death of other people, right? That's the dark side of a lot of addict stories is I may not have pulled the trigger, but I was a part of the trigger getting pulled. I was a participant. I wasn't a passive observer. And that's stuff that you have to, again, that's why I tell people, like, I don't, like you talked about the why of like, why Jesus, why go to church? Like nobody can absolve me of the things that I did when I was an addict, when I was full blown addict.
And especially not yourself.
Right. Definitely not myself because I can't escape the demons in my head. And
or you mean your conscience?
Yeah. And so you, for example, I could tell you my story. I could tell you about how I facilitated the death of different people when I was using. And you could absolve me. You're like, hey, man, you know what? You're a different person now. You've changed. That's behind you, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't change the fact that I was there. It doesn't change the fact that it happened. It doesn't change the fact that I was involved. Your absolution of me is because you don't understand. You're not part of my tribe. Versus if you just say, hey, man, I don't understand that. I've never been through that before, but I want you to know that Jesus died for that too. And in the name of Jesus Christ, I forgive you. That melts your heart. Like literally, like just saying it what makes me want to cry. Because there's power in that word. And people don't understand that power until they've been through something, not exactly like an addict, but you've been through something where there's so much shame and guilt and there's so much self-blame. And depending on how public it was, other people, your family, your friends, everybody's blaming you because they're like, you're a screw up. We don't want anything to do with you anymore. Or you make amends, but they don't want to forgive you. And you deserve that. And then you're walking around going like, is there any way I can get through this? Is there any way I can maybe not move past it, but move through it in such a way that I don't have to go to sleep thinking about it and wake up thinking about it every day? Well, there's only one word. And this is kind of his point is like, I've tried everything. And in the end, none of it worked. But this did. And that's why I'm a Christian now. And that's why I'm really serious about this stuff. And that's the point though, is we all judge. So coming back around then, when I saw him do that interview, I saw the clips come up on my YouTube. I'm like, that piece of crap. I'm like, ugh. Why is he on this podcast?
Or,
And then-
I mean, my first reaction is it's a scam, right? I mean, it's
100%.
fake.
Yeah, that's what addicts do. And he
Yeah.
talks about that too, because Barenthal calls him on the carpet about it. He's like, how do I know that this isn't you trying to create wiggle room? This isn't you trying to create public sympathy. This isn't you trying to find the angle so you can get out of this and go on with your career. And he addresses it very honestly and very openly and in a way that you go, yeah, he's not lying. He might be a great actor, but he's not that great. And maybe he is acting, and
I don't
maybe I
know if
want to
he-
believe him.
I mean, he's a better actor than I am. I'll just put it that way.
100%, right?
Yeah.
But in the end, it doesn't matter whether you believe him or not. What matters is that he has to prove it every day for the rest of his life. How can I believe you? Every single day. How long? The rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Come back in 5 years, and I better be the same person I am today as far as my sobriety goes. And if I'm
I'm
not,
okay
you
with
know I was
that.
lying. And maybe
mean-
he's lying to himself too, right? That's
Right,
the pink cloud we talk about.
I mean, I think the problem is that it's, like you said, it's, to borrow a word from a speech that I heard, definitely the addict is more extreme in these things, right?
Sure.
To whatever extreme. But on the other hand, I mean, I don't know that it's all that uncommon. I think it's common to all human experience. It's like we're really good liars.
Right.
We lie to everyone about who we are and what we're doing.
Yeah.
Like the functional drunk is like, it's kind of a funny story because it's the majority of the population around me here.
Right. Well, nowadays it's pharmaceutical drugs, but it used to be alcohol.
Right. So that's what I mean. I mean, or anything. I mean, social media has its own, and we know this biochemically, right, with the brain. It's similar to hard drug addiction as far as the brain
100%.
chemistry of it.
Yeah, it's the oxytocin and the dopamine.
Yeah, the hormonal responses. So you look at it like, we're none of us are really being all that honest about ourselves and about the world we live in and what we want and our desires and how they're corrupting, what we know is true. And yeah.
So
And
in
I
addiction,
found it
language,
encouraging.
We call it alcohol is cunning, baffling, and powerful. Our addiction is cunning, baffling, and powerful. It's cunning because it tricks us, like the devil's cunning. It's baffling because we just don't understand why we can't stop, and it's powerful because we can't stop. And so
when you said the devil, I was like, because I was going to say this sounds very demonic.
Exactly. Well, of course it is. That's why they're called spirits.
Ah, yes.
They used to be, anyways.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, words matter. Look
Yeah,
at
I got that from Carl Jung of all people. He talks about that.
Huh.
Yep.
Ah,
Carl Jung's like,
okay.
there's a reason they call alcohol spirits, because if you open yourself up to it, they'll take possession of you. That's addiction. The difference between you and me is that when I drink, I get possessed. Literally, I'm possessed.
I heard this in an interview. I know this is really tangential. Well, it's pertinent to what we're talking about at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But talking about like why do we see the kind of evils that we do in this world? And it's like, but the chemical addictions that we have,
It's demonic.
that it opens up. I mean,
Yeah.
is it possible to kind of rend the separation between heaven and earth? Between the spiritual realm and the earthly realm, and start to actually see things, right? Experience things that maybe we were insulated from.
Remember, Lutherans used to refer to baptism as an exorcism
That's right.
before the therapeutic language took over, and we decided it was bad for people's self-esteem to be told that they were possessed by a demon when they were born. But I've met demon-possessed people. I'm sure you have too. I mean, legitimately, not like people that were weird. I mean, I've legitimately met demon-possessed people. And according to the theology, I was possessed by an evil spirit. And that's why it was so difficult to break away from it for so long.
A clever, cunning. What were the words you used?
Cunning, baffling, and powerful.
Yeah, that's wow. That's descriptive.
Yeah, and to the point then of the narrative is that in Flannery, this is what we have. We have a cunning, baffling, powerful enemy, which she frames within the context of the racism of the Deep South in the 1960s.
Yeah,
And as it
that's
plays out now-
symptomatic, right?
Yeah, but it's, again, you're creating a system, an institution based on skin color, based on class, based on behavior, because these people are uneducated, these people are overeducated, these people are somewhere in the middle. And she created this entire caste system, this entire spectrum of people within this doctor's office. And then it all explodes in the end. She's attacked, and then they go home. And like we talked about, when she gets home, that's her refuge, that's solace.
Yeah.
But yet she then says, when we're stopped at, but she could have imagined it being burned to the ground when she got home, because the veil of reality had been ripped off when that girl attacked her.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of
And
the
we said,
separation
right,
of
is that
spiritual and
we
earthly, I
didn't know
forgot
if she
about
was
that.
demon possessed, or if she was there to be treated for her mental illness, or this combination of both. We don't know. And
that girl, you know where you'd find her today? You find her
college campus, but yeah.
Right. But her social media would be shared by libs of TikTok.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely.
Like,
yeah.
What is going on with this person? Mm-hmm. They share that stuff all the time.
Right. So then, if you haven't listened to the last episode, we just summed it up for you, but go listen to it if you want. Otherwise,
and added a little. Yeah.
We're going to dive in. What page is this? I don't have the page number.
I have it. Page
24.
Yep, that's where I am
24.
Too. The pickup truck and all that.
Right. So as their pickup truck turned into their own dirt road and made the crest of the hill, Mrs. Turpin gripped the window ledge and looked out, suspiciously. Well, there we go. The land sloped gracefully down through a field dotted with lavender weeds, and at the start of the rise, their small yellow frame house, with its little flower bed spread out around it like a fancy apron, set primly in its accustomed place between two giant hickory trees. Oh, hickory smoked bacon. She would not have been startled to see a burnt wound between two blackened chimneys. There we go.
There it is.
Neither of them felt like eating, so they put on their house clothes and lowered the shade in the bedroom and lay down. Cloud with his leg on a pillow and herself with a damp washcloth over her eye. The instant she was flat on her back, the image of a razor-backed hog with warts on its face and horns came coming out behind its ears, snorted into her head. She moaned a low, quiet moan. I assume the razor-backed warthog she's imagining was the young woman who attacked her.
Yeah. Notice the other thing here too. We've this is a pastoral application, but when you're in a sense sinned against here, or violated. Yeah. It's not just safe space, but I mean, when there's demonic attack, it has this shame. I mean, they don't even want to eat. They've lost their appetite.
Right. Well, there's a trauma to it.
And they closed. I mean, they're hiding because they lowered the shade in the bedroom. The whole deal.
I've talked about that before when I lived in Portland and we stopped that man from raping that girl.
Oh my!
I couldn't leave my apartment for 3 days. I was so traumatized by the event that I couldn't leave my house for 3 days. And then after 3 days, I called my pastor. I said, I need to talk to somebody. I'm losing my mind.
Well, you touched evil.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's like you can't encounter that and not have the veil of reality stripped back to go, yeah, you're not. This isn't what you think it is.
There's more going on here.
Right. And
what
you can assent to this intellectually. You can accept this at an intellectual and an abstract level. But when it's physical, when it's real, when it's in your face, it's inescapable at that point that, yeah, okay, this is not a drill. This is the real thing. And it's not like the movies.
Yeah, and God forbid you have too many experiences like this, because they are haunting.
Oh, yeah. So she moaned a low, quiet moan at the thought of the razor-backed hog charging out at her. I am not, she said tearfully, a warthog from hell. Well, there we go. She's thinking of herself.
Correct.
But the denial had no force. The girl's eyes and her words, even the tone of her voice, low but clear, directed only to her, brooked no repudiation. She had been singled out for the message. Oh, that's right. The girl called her a hog, didn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah. And they've been talking about hogs.
You really did space out last week.
Yeah, that's right. She was talking about hogs with the old lady.
All right.
She had been singled out for the message, though there was trash in the room to whom it might justly have been applied. Pigpen? The full force of this fact struck her only now. There was a woman there who was neglecting her own child, but she had been overlooked. The message had been given to Ruby Turpin, a respectable, hard-working, church-going woman. The tears dried. Her eyes began to burn instead with wrath. There we go. She rose on her elbow, and the washcloth fell into her hand. Claude was lying on his back, snoring. She wanted to tell him what the girl had said. At the same moment, she did not wish to put the image of herself as a warthog from hell into his mind. What a great epitaph, though. You're a warthog from hell. So colorful.
Put it on your tombstone, right?
Right. Here lies a warthog from hell. Well, there we go. Hey, Claude, she muttered and pushed his shoulder. Claude opened one pale baby blue eye. She looked into it warily. He did not think about anything. What is it? He said and closed the eye again. Nothing, she said. Does your leg pain you? Hurts like hell, Claude said. It'll quit directly, she said and lay back down. I heard a word yesterday, speaking of Southern dialect, conversated. Instead of conversation, we conversated. I was like, that is so cool. I love that. I'm going to use that from now on. We conversated.
Yeah. I had one of the kids misspeak reading Genesis and said veggie tables. And I'm like, hey, that makes sense.
I like that.
Yeah, veggie tables.
I like it. I'll quit directly, she said, and lay back down. In a moment, Claude was snoring again. For the rest of the afternoon, they lay there. Claude slept. She scowled at the ceiling. Occasionally, she raised her fist and made a small stabbing motion over her chest, as if she was defending her innocence to invisible guests who were like the comforters of Job. Reasonable seeming, but wrong. About 5:30, Claude stirred. Got to go after those black folk, he sighed, not moving. There we go. We're just going to call them black folk.
Okay.
As I was taught when I lived in Louisiana. Just call them black folk. She was looking straight up, as if there were unintelligible handwriting on the ceiling. The protuberance over her eye had turned a greenish blue. Listen here, she said. What? Kiss me. Claude leaned over and kissed her loudly on the mouth. He pinched her side, and their hands interlocked. Her expression of ferocious concentration did not change. Claude got up, groaning and growling, and limped off. She continued to study the ceiling. Now, was it established that this is her son or her husband?
I think it was established that it was her husband.
Okay.
I didn't think of it any differently.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
Obviously here, I would.
Yeah.
Let's go
Right.
with that's definitely her husband.
There is something interesting going on, right? Is that she's still,
But
despite
again,
the word of that demon-possessed girl, she doesn't think it's true. Or if it is true, she should have said it to everybody in the room.
Right.
So she's still trying to escape judgment.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Deflecting blame, even though she knows, she bears it, on her conscience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She did not get up until she heard the pickup truck coming back with the Negroes. Then she rose and thrust her feet in her brown Oxfords, which she did not bother to lace, and stumped out onto the back porch and got her red plastic bucket. She emptied a tray of ice cubes into it and filled it half full of water and went out into the backyard. Every afternoon after Claude brought the hands in, one of the boys helped him put out hay, and the rest waited in the back of the truck until he was ready to take them home. The truck was parked in the shade under one of the hickory trees. So Claude is almost like an innocent.
Yeah, she doesn't apply that judgment to him.
She doesn't, because I think, again, like I said, in the first act, so to speak, of this, he's almost depicted like a child.
Yeah.
He does what she tells him to do. He's not really aware of what's going on around him.
But as her husband,
he is a reflection of that little boy in the blue jumper.
He does have a vocational responsibility.
He does. He is to fetch people and give them rides places.
I mean, to me, it's a picture of Adam and Eve garden, sin kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm driving at, is that there's a certain naivety to him, a certain innocence, a certain dumbness to the world that he's not touched by it. Even when he's kicked by one of the farm animals, he's just not touched by it.
What do you mean I'm going to have thorns and thistles? It's like, were you not paying attention here?
Right.
Do you not see what just happened?
Yeah. There is it's the sense of like he is not touched by the world, but she is trying desperately to shield them from that at the same time.
Yeah, and keep him childlike. That's interesting.
Because like she noted, he didn't even notice or hear that she called her a warthog from hell. Like he wasn't
even paying attention.
He got knocked over. Like that was that. Like. So hi y'all this evening, Miss Turpin asked grimly, appearing with the bucket and the dipper. There were three women and a boy in the truck. Us doing nicely, the old woman said. How you doing? And her gaze stuck immediately on the dark lump on Mrs. Turpin's forehead. You done fell down, ain't you? She asked in a solicitous voice. The old woman was dark and almost toothless. She had on an old felt hat of Claude set back on her head. The other two women were younger and lighter, and they both had new, bright green sun hats. One of them had hers on her head. The others had taken hers off, and the boy was grinning beneath it. Mrs. Turpin set the bucket down on the floor of the truck. Y'all help yourselves, she said. She looked round to make sure Claude had gone. No, I didn't fall down, she said, folding her arms. It was something worse than that. Ain't nothing bad happened to you, the old woman said. She said it as if they all knew that Mrs. Turpin was protected in some special way by divine providence. You just had you a little fall. We were in town at the doctor's office for where the cow kicked Mr. Turpin. Mrs. Turpin said in a flat tone that indicated they could leave off their foolishness. And there was this girl there, a big fat girl with her face all broke out. I could look at that girl and tell she was peculiar, but I couldn't tell how. And me and her mama were just talking and going along, and all of a sudden, wham! She throws this big book she was reading at me, and, "Nah," the old woman cried out. Then she jumps over the table and commences to choke me. "Nah," they all exclaimed. "Nah." "How come she do that?" the old woman asked. "What ail her?" Mrs. Turpin only glared in front of her. "Something ail her," the old woman said. "They carried her off in an ambulance," Miss Turpin continued, "but before she went, she was rolling on the floor, and they were trying to hold her down to give her a shot, and she said something to me." She paused. "You know what she said to me?" "What'd she say?" they asked. "She said," Miss Turpin began and stopped, her face very dark and heavy. The sun was getting whiter and whiter, blanching the sky overhead so that the leaves of the hickory tree were black in the face of it. She could not bring forth the words. "Something real ugly," she muttered. "She sure shouldn't said nothing ugly to you," the old woman said. "You so sweet. You the sweetest lady I know." "She pretty, too," the one with the hat one said. "And stout," the other one said. "I never knowed no sweeter white lady." "That's the truth before Jesus," the old woman said. "Amen. You just as sweet and pretty as you can be." Miss Turpin knew just exactly how much Negro flattery was worth, and it added to her rage.
It's like Minnesota Nice, but it's a different kind of thing.
I want self-justification right now, and I need you to affirm it. But please, like, one sugar cube is enough. I don't need all the sugar in my cup. Like, just back off. She knew. She knew. There was an astounded silence. Sorry. Miss Turpin knew just exactly how much Negro flattery was worth, and it added to her rage. "She said," she began again and finished this time with a fierce rush of breath, "that I was an old warthog from hell." There was an astounded silence. "Where's she at?" the youngest woman cried in a piercing voice. "Let me see her. I'll kill her." "I'll kill her with you," the other one cried. "She belongs in the asylum," the old woman said emphatically. "You the sweetest white lady I know." "She's pretty, too," the other two said. "Stout as she can be, and sweet. Jesus satisfied with her." "'Deed he is," the old woman declared. "Idiots." Miss Turpin growled to herself. "You could never say anything intelligent to a black person. You could talk at them, but not with them." "Y'all ain't drunk your water," she said shortly. "Leave the bucket in the truck when you're finished with it. I got more to do than just stand around past the time of day." She moved off and into the house. She stood for a moment in the middle of the kitchen. The dark protuberance over her eye looked like a miniature tornado cloud, which might any moment sweep across the horizon of her brow. How is this woman not celebrated as one of the greatest authors in the 20th century?
It's so visual. Like you're
Right?
there. Well, and
It's
auditory too. I mean, because of the language.
Well, you don't need to make a movie or a TV show about it. Like,
yeah, well, we talked about that last time. There's just so few. I mean, there's...
the word picture she paints for you is so vivid and vibrant.
You know what you could do, though? I mean, if you did like like an animated series, where it was very stylized, you could do that.
Right.
To try to exaggerate some of the features that she's characterizing. I think that conversation is so interesting because it's... There's a dynamic to it, and there's a performative aspect to it, which she points out that's really frustrating to her. It's like, why can't they be honest with me?
Because if they are, they might get lynched or fired.
Bingo! Right. It's like, no, they know how to play this game, and so that they keep their job. They get the ice cube water, and yeah.
Every time we went to a gas station in Shreveport, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir. We go to a gas station in Keachai. What's up, cuz? Hey, sis. You're like, how come you talk differently here than there? Well, because those are white folk and these are my folk. And I'm like, oh, sorry, I'm from Minnesota. I don't understand these things. Right.
No,
and there's a path.
It's not just race. I mean, it's not just race. It can be any number of things, right? Like if you're in a certain context, like you don't talk to your pastor the way you talk to your parents, or that you talk to your friends.
I hope not.
Well, we kind of encourage people to be more honest. You know,
just not like I talk to my parents. Let's not go that far.
Oh yeah, right.
But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the pretension, that's the word that comes to mind.
Sure, absolutely.
It's like, what?
It's inauthentic.
Right. And it gets in the way of reality, of real conversation even.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think in those moments you recognize then these people, if things went bad, these people are not going to show up for me.
Mm-mm.
If the barn's on fire, if there's a blight and a drought, these people are not going to show up for me.
Yeah. The stout, pretty white person.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Stout, thick, with 2 C's. Yeah.
Well, it's a positive virtue for them anyway.
Sure. But you know what they talk about when they're at home and she's not within earshot. They don't talk about her as being stout. They don't talk about her as being the prettiest white woman they know. Right? They probably refer to her from then on as a warthog. Right? All the way home, they're probably like, oh, that's good, actually. I agree with that. Or maybe they do like her, but they don't know how to talk to her because of that whole organization of the society.
Right.
Like you said, it's not necessarily, quote unquote, racial, but it is a class system.
Right. And it's just like your conversation about, with Barenthal and Shia. I don't know. How do you pronounce his last name?
Shia LaBeouf. Shia,
LaBeouf.
Whatever.
All right. It's
LaBeouf.
French or whatever. Yeah.
LaBeouf.
Speaking of racist. Where they both have been through experience in such a way that they can just be brutal, honest. There's no pretension. It's like
exactly.
Yeah. And I know
you and I have talked about this. The reason that we don't suffer fools lightly
there you
because
go.
I can't stand it. I can't stand pretentiousness. I can't stand fake conversations. That's why I can't stand chit chat. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk.
Yeah. But it's so off-putting. I mean, I find this like talking with other pastors, not you, but others. It's like, and everybody has their guards up, in a way. And they're like not willing to admit their failures and where they're struggling and what they're not doing well. And it's like, I look like I'm out with other pastors. This is actually an opportunity for a lot of confession.
Right.
And they're not interested.
Well, one aspect, it's called fraud syndrome in therapeutic talk, right? Fraud syndrome. Like people are going to find out that I'm not holy, I'm not pious, I'm not the man they think I am, versus you do realize that everybody actually has already taken your reading and they know exactly who you are. You're acting a part and they know you're acting. They know that. They know that because they've seen you. They've studied you. They see you every Sunday. And it's like reality TV shows. The first couple episodes of any reality TV show, everyone's on their best behavior. But by the end of the first week, everybody reverts back to, well, this is actually who I am. This is my character. And that's when the show gets good because that's when they start backstabbing each other and conniving and plotting.
Forget about the cameras and just
they forget
be
the
themselves.
cameras. Exactly. Yeah. As a pastor, you can try and be professional and be pious. But you and I have children, for example, and our children do not care. In the middle of the sermon or during the prayer of the church or when we're trying to talk to someone after church who's in a crisis, our children do not care that we are a pastor because our vocation is dad.
Right.
And when my 4-year-old needs me, the house could be on fire. It doesn't matter.
Right. But that's why I think it's helpful to have your family as a pastor rather than, be single or something. I mean, maybe that's your life. But in our case, it's like nobody in the congregation, I imagine, disconnects the behavior of my children from me. Like the two are interlaced.
100%.
So when they see my kids acting a certain way, that reflects on me, positive or negative.
Exactly.
And I welcome that, right? Because it's like this is a great opportunity for conversation. It's like,
Both
wow,
ways.
your kids are well behaved.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
I treat the children of the congregation the same way I treat my own children.
Right.
Because they're my children, spiritually speaking. And therefore, not only do I love them unconditionally and forgive them and show them mercy as I would my own children, but I also hold them accountable as I hold my own children accountable for their behavior in church. That doesn't mean I'm heavy-handed or dictatorial, but it does mean then that they know if pastor gives them a certain look, it's time to knock it off.
Right. So Mrs. Turpin here is trying to be introspective, right? She wants to know, is this true that I'm a warthog? And yet no one is going to have that conversation with her.
No. Well, again, I think she's trying to justify herself to herself, but knowing maybe this young woman has a point.
This is why your pastor is not your therapist, but there may be an opportunity where you can be more honest with your pastor than you can be with others.
No, 100%. Because I'm not going to give you counsel and tell you to go read a self-help book. I'm going to absolve you.
Right.
that will
right, and I'm not
actually
going
change
to
you.
reveal what you tell me anyway. So there's that too.
That too,
There's
yeah.
Confidentiality.
So she stood for a moment then in the middle of the kitchen with her tornado cloud protuberance on her head. Her lower lip protruded dangerously. So you almost get this image of like a Neanderthal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Her brow is sticking out. Her bottom lip is sticking out.
Blocky.
She squared. Wookie. She squared her massive shoulders. Then she marched into the front of the house and out the side door and started down the road to the pig parlor. She had the look of a woman going single-handed, weaponless into battle. She's going to the pigs.
Mm-hmm.
And she's going downhill. She's descending. The sun was a deep yellow now, like a harvest moon, and was riding westward very fast over the far tree line, as if it meant to catch the hogs before she did. The road was rutted, and she kicked several good-sized stones out of her path as she strode along. The pig parlor was on a little knoll at the end of a lane that ran off from the side of the barn. It was a square of concrete as large as a small room, with a board fence about 4 feet high around it. The concrete floor sloped slightly so that the hogwash could drain off into a trench where it was carried to the field for fertilizer. Claude was standing on the outside, on the edge of the concrete, hanging onto the top board, hosing down the floor inside. The hose was connected to the faucet of water trough nearby. Mrs. Turpin climbed up beside him and glowered down at the hogs inside. I love that word, by the way. Glowered.
It's beautiful.
There were 7 long-snouted, bristly shoats in it, tan with liver-colored spots, and an old sow a few weeks off from farrowing. She was lying on her side, grunting. The shoats were running about, shaking themselves like idiot children, their little slit pig eyes searching the floor for anything left. She had read that pigs were the most intelligent animal. She doubted it. They were supposed to be smarter than dogs. There had even been a pig astronaut. He had performed his assignment perfectly, but died of a heart attack afterwards because they left him in his electric suit, sitting upright throughout his examination when naturally a hog should be on all fours.
Just a side note, right?
Well, the subtle stab at her where she says these pigs are like idiot children, and then her first thought is, hey, remember that pig astronaut story where the pig died of a heart attack because they kept him sitting up too long, and everybody knows that pigs have to be on all 4 legs? Like, that's something a child would think.
Mm-hmm.
That's a childish thought. Like, that's stupid.
So there's a nice contrast set up there in
Right.
that paragraph. Yeah.
Right. It also sets us up for Animal Farm. 2 legs
yeah.
good, 4 legs bad.
Mm.
A gruntin' and a rootin' and a groanin'. Give me that hose, she said, yanking away from Claude. Go on and carry them black folk home and then get off that leg. You look like you might have swallowed a mad dog, Claude observed, but he got down and limped off. He paid no attention to her humors. She's in her humors. Again, we've lost so much language. So much
Right.
just richness.
Well, that's old world. I mean, that's old world understanding of
Yes.
biology, right?
The humors, though. You lost your humors. I love it. Until he was out of earshot, Mrs. Turpin stood on the side of the pen, holding the hose and pointing the stream of water at the hind quarters of any shoat that looked as if it might try to lie down. When he had had time to get over the hill, she turned her head slightly and her wrathful eyes scanned the path. He was nowhere in sight. She turned back again and seemed to gather herself up. Her shoulders rose and she drew in her breath. What do you send me a message like that for? She said in a low, fierce voice, barely above a whisper, but with the force of a shout in its concentrated fury. How am I a hog? And me both. How am I saved and from hell too? Her free fist was knotted, and with the other she gripped the hose, blindly pointing the stream of water in and out of the eye of the old sow, whose outraged squeal she did not hear. Oh, this is so great. In all the other parables we've read, it's always been the hidden God.
Mm-hmm.
Almost exclusively, it's always the hidden God and Satan.
Right.
Whereas here, she's like, Jesus, what's the deal?
Right. Well, yeah, and what's different is that those parables dealt more with the supernatural realities that we don't see.
Yeah.
Right. But they tried to reveal them to us, right?
Yeah.
With these conversation,
Good
with
point.
Satan and yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas here, it's like, no, this is digging deep into the human condition,
Mm-hmm.
right? And revealing who we are.
Yeah.
And God's still hidden in a way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But not so much because he's definitely on her conscience.
And this is a point I was thinking about as I was reading this, I think, is really what she drives at when she talks about being Christ-haunted.
Yeah.
Is for us, we would say, you don't have a preacher, but you believe in Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And I see this every summer, as do you. If you check into social media and you see members that haven't been to church in a month or 2 or 3 months posting about what they're doing in the summertime when they're not going to church.
The beach, the boat, the whatever.
Whatever it might be. And they're saying, I'm so grateful that Jesus is in my life. I praise God that I have this family and that they're baptized and they're all well. It's like, okay, you have belief, but you don't have a preacher. And so your belief is based on what? Is it based on the word? No, because you're not receiving it.
Well, for her, it's identity. So maybe baptismal identity if you want to be really charitable.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. Well, that's what I was driving at, is that you have an identity. You're a baptized child of God. Good. You listened. You got that part driven home to you. Good.
Mm-hmm.
But the font is behind you, both historically and actually, because you're not there.
Mm-hmm.
You're not dipping your finger in the water then to remind yourself of your baptism. You're not coming to the table to receive the body and blood. You're not receiving the gospel as it is preached to you in the flesh, which you and I have talked about, especially the last 2 years, about the incarnational nature of the word, the church, the sacraments, that God never intended for us to have a disembodied faith. Not only disembodied from Christ's actual body and blood, but disembodied from the body of Christ, the church.
Yeah.
And so this woman, she's talking to Jesus, she's praying to Jesus, she's having private conversations with Jesus.
Through the pigs
In the doctor's office, but she doesn't have a preacher. And so Flannery is pushing the symbol now. Am I from hell or am I heaven bound? Am I a hog or am I a saint?
Good question.
And so is it gonna unravel and she's gonna go left instead of right? Or is it she's gonna hold the tension of Mrs. Turpin and go, no, you're both.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the thing is what's it going to be?
And pigs, scripturally speaking.
Yep.
Never mind unclean animal, but then that story with the demons going into the pigs and into the water. Yeah. It's got to be in the background here.
Well, if you read her letters, there may be discussion about that parable.
There you go.
Not the parable, that event. But yeah. So let's go. The pig parlor commanded a view of a back pasture where their 20 beef cows were gathered around the hay bales Claude and the boy had put out. The freshly cut pasture sloped down to the highway. Across it was their cotton field, and beyond that a dark green dusty wood which they owned as well. So they're pretty well off, actually.
You know what's also beautiful here? I mean, thinking about our current context, is it's not monoculture.
No.
Yeah, I mean, this is homesteading is what it is. Yeah. With a little bit to take to market and the rest to provide for yourself.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Across it, the cotton field, and then the wood. The sun was behind the wood, very red, looking over the paling of trees like a farmer, inspecting his own hogs. Why me, she rumbled. It's no trash around here, black or white, that I haven't given to, and break my back to the bone every day working, and do for the church.
There it is.
She appeared to be the right size woman to command the arena before her. How am I a hog, she demanded. Exactly, how am I like them? And she jabbed the stream of water at the shoats. There was plenty of trash there. It didn't have to be me. If you like trash better, go get yourself some trash then, she railed. You could have made me trash, or a black person. If trash is what you wanted, why didn't you make me trash? She shook her fist with the hose in it, and a watery snake appeared momentarily in the air. I could quit working and take it easy and be filthy, she growled. Lounge about the sidewalks all day drinking root beer, dip snuff and spit in every puddle and have it all over my face. I could be nasty. Or you could have made me a black person. It's too late for me to be a black person, she said with deep sarcasm, but I could act like one. Lay down in the middle of the road and stop traffic. Roll on the ground.
What?
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, this is an anecdote.
Yeah.
In the deepening light, everything was taking on a mysterious hue. The pasture was growing a particular glassy green, and the streak of the highway had turned lavender. She braced herself for a final assault, and this time Her voice rolled out over the pasture. "Go on," she yelled. "Call me a hog. Call me a hog again. From hell. Call me a warthog from hell. Put that bottom rail on top. There'll be a top and bottom. There'll still be a top and bottom." A garbled echo returned to her. A final surge of fury shook her, and she roared, "Who do you think you are?" The color of everything, field and crimson sky, burned for a moment with a transparent intensity. The question carried over the pasture and across the highway and the cotton field and returned to her clearly, like an answer from beyond the wood. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out of it.
So we were talking about this because we were both looking at Genesis this week, which I don't know how that happened. It's the beginning of the school year, I guess, or something. But what was I going to say about this? Oh, the way that creation speaks.
Right.
And that God speaks through creation. It's not but it's wordless, right? Unless you have God's word attached to it, you don't really know what it is. But I thought about this with like the lamps in the sky, right? The stars.
Yeah.
And that Moses says that they're for signs and for seasons, and they're meant to communicate to you.
Right.
But we're so like
all creation praises the glory of its.
Right. I was thinking of the psalmist too. Right. Yeah. And there's still some anecdotes out there. I think like the sailor stuff, right? Red sky morning, sailor's warning, that kind of thing. But for the most part, we don't think of
right. Well, it's because we're all looking down all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or navel gazing
anymore. Yeah. And if you do look up, the light pollution blocks out the sky.
Well, it's true. I mean, because what was I reflecting on this? Oh yeah, that the sun during the day you can't really decide. You can't tell what time of the year it is. But when the lesser light comes out and then the stars, then you can actually do like what season are we in, right?
Right, exactly.
Where are we in that season? And so all the the longer term stuff, not the daily stuff, but the the months and the years can be, or even location can be determined at night. Right. Anyway, so what she's doing here is like she's running with that the sky itself is communicating. Mm-hmm. God is speaking to her. I mean,
well, the echo. Of her own voice going back at her from the wood.
Yeah, and that too. Yeah.
Which is very Jobin, to her point.
Yeah, that's true. But the color of the sky is indicating her mood, or at least the response to her mood. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating.
We're still again, the name of the story is Revelation. So was the revelation at the beginning of the story in the doctor's office, or has it yet to be revealed to her?
Yeah, we're waiting for it.
So a tiny truck, clods, appeared on the highway, heading rapidly out of sight. Its gears scraped thinly. It looked like a child's toy. At any moment, a bigger truck might smash into it and scatter Claude and the black people's brains all over the road. Notice how she sees everything as childish? She
definitely Claude.
Office, she described people as childish. She talks about the black women as in childish terms. She talked about the pigs in childish terms. She talks about the truck in childish. Everything's like childish. The way that she describes everything. She treats almost everybody like a child.
Right. And we know what God does with that, right?
Exactly.
I'm thinking of, obviously Mary's song Magnificat, but it's in Isaiah too, right? A lot of the prophets, but, tearing down the proud.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, making the high places a plain.
Well, and also the first shall be last and the last shall be first, to that point
too. Yeah.
So Mrs. Turpin stood there, and this is the great thing, as a side note too, the great thing for me as a reader, maybe you too, is when you know someone is biblically literate, and it's not a billboard splashed across the narrative, I'm talking about the Bible, but rather it's all crumbs, right? They're leaving you these crumbs, and kind of almost like a wink and a nod. If you know, you know.
This has been happening to me with the Small Catechism. Because I think the way I learned it is like, this is Luther's explanation. And then as you're reading it, you're like, well, wait a minute. Yeah. like Second Commandment, you shouldn't curse and swear. Contrary. And then you're like, wait a minute, what happened with Peter? He's in the courtyard and they say, aren't you a follower of this Jesus of Nazareth? And then rather than he misuses God's name by cursing and swearing against what they're saying. It's like,
he does that constantly.
Well,
I swear I won't let you die.
And you also have, that's earlier in the narrative. What is it? The explanation of the second article, right? And it's not by gold or silver. And it's like, that's straight out of 1 Peter.
Right.
It's like, so Luther had, it's all biblical allusion in the catechism. It's not his, it is his explanation in a sense, but it's coming out of that rich, deep biblical literacy that he has.
It's that sense of, like the word laud and honor that we talk about liturgically, laud, all laud and honor. The word laud means to actually brag about. It means praise. We usually translate it as praise, but in Hebrew, that word literally means to boast or brag about someone or something.
Okay.
And really, that's what I get from that is he's boasting. He's bragging about the Word of God.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, have you read this? This is amazing. You haven't. Let me put this in here so that you get a taste of this. That's, as a Lutheran, again, as someone who became Lutheran by conviction from reading the catechisms, and as someone who loves words, that was a big deal for me. It's like when you read the catechism, you're like, this guy really likes words. Right? It's like the word
but
sin,
ultimately, the word, right?
The word that, like, Luther doesn't use the word sin until the second article of the Creed. Think about that. You read the Ten Commandments and you're just like, yep, it's talking about us. He never once refers to us as sinners. But then in the second article, he refers to us as sinners.
He does in the conclusion, right? The sins of the father to the third and fourth generation.
But he's quoting the Bible. He's quoting from Scripture there. Whereas he holds off on even using the word sin until he gets to the second article of the Creed, because that's where it belongs.
Because that's where forgiveness is. Yeah.
But he just thinks that way. That's the point. Like, he didn't sit down and plot this out over years like the other guys that were supposed to write the catechism were trying to do. He just sat down and ripped it off. He's like, this is what I meant.
That's not exactly true. I mean,
he spent several decades preparing to rip it off.
And he spent months preaching before he wrote it.
Sure.
So he preached through all the articles.
Sure.
Yeah. But, yeah.
Yes. He's not a systematician. He simply lives in the Word. And therefore, when it comes time to write something to explain it, he's already there. He doesn't have to go searching for words. He has the Word. And I think that's the same thing with Flannery.
There you go. Yeah.
Flannery doesn't have to go searching for metaphors, analogies, and words, because she's living in that Word, not only in the Bible, which she has plenty of time to read because she's bedridden a lot of the time, but she's going to Mass every day. She's walking back and forth from her house to the church every day. She's observing life.
Clearly, she's seen a tornado before.
But she's looking through God's Word at the people around her. And so all of life is being interpreted for her. Reality itself is interpreted for her through God's Word, and then she is commenting on God's Word in this form.
I had that reflection this morning. That with Peter again, it was with Peter in the courtyard, and the servant girl's like, but your speech betrays you. And I made that point. I had never made this connection before, but for like we as Christians, like if we're honest, people will know we're Christians because our speech betrays us. The way that we talk, the words that we use, the language, the way we see the world, the way we describe, our interaction with creation. Well, there you go. You just said creation, and it's like our speech betrays us.
You know how people pick up on it from me? Is when they talk about stuff, they're like, like my coach asked me once, she's like, do you still love your wife? I'm like, oh yeah, she's a gift to me.
Oh, there you go.
And he goes, what? I go, God gave her to me. She's a gift. Like, nobody talks that way about their wife unless they're in that tradition.
Right.
And specifically the Christian tradition. You don't hear other religions talk about it that same way.
Right. Well, we've talked about this with the other authors that we looked at in our series here, is that we can tell we can tell they were raised in the church, that they have the language of it, even if they've rejected it. Yeah. But they can't help but use. Shakespeare's that way, right? I mean, he brought a lot of 100%. Biblical allusions into common usage.
So much so that there are Shakespeare kind of idioms that people think are from the Bible. They're like, oh, I think that's in the Bible. It's like, no, that's actually Shakespeare.
Right. Isn't there that rumor, legend, whatever, that he translated parts of it for whichever, Coverdale or whoever?
Yeah.
Because you can do this thing with numerology in the Psalms and get...
Oh, can you?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was. I remember hearing this in grade school.
It sounds like the next National Treasure movie.
That he like autobiographically wrote his name into the translation
of
Psalms or whatever that he's attributed.
Absolutely.
Maybe. Who knows?
Yeah. Where were we? Monumental statues. That's what we were.
Yep.
So she stood there, gaze fixed on the highway. 5 or 6 minutes, the truck reappeared, returning. She waited until it had time to turn into their own road. Then, like a monumental statue coming to life, she bent her head slowly and gazed, as if through the very heart of mystery, down into the pig parlor at the Hogs. They had settled, all in one corner around the old sow who was grunting softly. I wonder what that's a metaphor for. A red glow suffused them. They appeared to pant with a secret life, until the sun slipped finally behind the tree line. Mrs. Turpin remained there with her gaze bent to them as if she were absorbing some abysmal life-giving knowledge. At last she lifted her head. There was only a purple streak in the sky, cutting through a field of crimson and leading like an extension of the highway into the descending dusk. She raised her hands from the side of the pen in a gesture, hieratic and profound. A visionary light settled in her eyes. She saw the streak as a vast swinging bridge extending upward from the earth through a field of living fire. Upon it, a vast horde of souls were tumbling toward heaven. There were whole companies of white trash, clean for the first time in their lives, and bands of black people in white robes, and battalions of freaks and lunatics shouting and clapping and leaping like frogs. And bringing up the end of the procession was a tribe of people whom she recognized at once as those who, like herself and Claude, had always had a little of everything and the given wit to use it right. She leaned forward to observe them closer. I just love the fact that your church bell is ringing in the background as I'm reading this revelation.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
They were marching behind the others with great dignity, accountable as they had always been for good order and common sense and respectable behavior. They alone were on key. Yet she could see by their shocked and altered faces, even their virtues were being burned away. She lowered hands and gripped the rail of the hog pen, her eyes small, but fixed unblinkingly on what lay ahead. In a moment, the vision faded, but she remained where she was. At length, she got down and turned off the faucet, and in her slow way on the darkening path to the house. In woods around her, the invisible cricket choruses had struck up, but what she heard were the voices of the souls, climbing upward into the starry field and shouting, Hallelujah.
So there's your revelation.
There's your revelation. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. That's what I mean. She's a theologian of the cross.
She puts herself at the end of the line, right?
Well, the revelation is that you're last. All your virtue, all your wit, it's worthless. It's actually holding you back.
And all those that you've put judgment upon
are in front of you.
Are clothed in white.
Yeah.
And you might be on key, but...
Exactly, but you're off.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not singing. You may be on key, but you're singing the wrong tune. Again, now, if you just said this to somebody in 1963, 64, 65, just said, hey, just so you know, good white Christian person that lives in Georgia and goes to church every Sunday, you're the least in the kingdom of heaven.
Mm-hmm.
All your virtue and your wit, all your good behavior, everything you've done with what God has given you makes you least in the kingdom. They're not going to listen to you. They're not going to listen to that. They're not going to hear that preaching that black people are going to get into heaven ahead of you. All the white trash that aren't even allowed to come to your church on Sunday, they're in heaven ahead of you. Like all the, what did she say? All the lunatics. And
this reminded me of Capon, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Freaks and lunatics. All the freaks and lunatics are going to get in ahead of you. They wouldn't listen.
And rather than leaping like deer, Isaiah, they're clapping and leaping like frogs.
But if you put it in a narrative like this, so that you're reading it, you're like, yeah, you know what? She is the villain. She is the antagonist. All those other people, they're the good people. Well, no, actually. That's not how this works.
Mm-mm. No, they're all together in the end.
They're all together in the end, exactly. Which, again, is why racism is stupid. At its base, it's stupid because we're all getting in, and it doesn't have anything to do with the color of your skin, your class, or what you do with what God has given you. It has to do with faith.
Have we said it before? Like, isms are stupid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, republicanism. It's like, what? I don't even know what that is.
Even mean? Exactly.
Well, it's not what it meant 10 years ago.
Usually ism signifies that the institution is actively trying to get rid of whatever the Lutheran was or the Republic was, or, true communalism, for example. I'm down with true communalism. I think that's a
community. Sure.
Yeah, community, exactly. Community, congregation, the commune. I'm even down with the commune if we lived in a sinless world. But as I noted last week, I texted you, what does utopianism lead to? Narcissism. And what was the other one?
Nihilism.
Like prejudice and narcissism. Mm-hmm. Because your problem Gillespie, is that you do not share my idea. You don't share my values. You don't share my utopian vision, and that's why it's not going to ever be realized. You're in the way.
I made that point on Facebook, and just that, it's kind of astounding to me that I've watched 1776 the musical. I mean, I understand in some limited way that these 13 colonies really aren't on the same page on a lot of things.
Sure.
But they had a common enemy, and so they could find a way to have the Congress, and then write the Declaration, and then the Constitution, the whole deal, right?
Right.
But it was so limited because they were honest.
Right.
They're honest about it, right? That we really don't have a lot in common. I mean, they had different faiths. I mean, you had the Catholic colonies, you had the Protestant ones. You had obviously
outlaw Roman Catholicism.
Mm-hmm. You had obviously different approaches to chattel slavery. You had different economies. You had different environment, terrain, even just, I guess, broadly speaking, lifestyle, if you want to put it that way.
Absolutely.
But even worldview. I mean, how they understand
different
themselves.
Economies.
Oh, totally. Right. So this unity, what was it grounded in? A common enemy. That was basically it.
100%.
Right.
Well, what unites us to this day?
That's my question. That's my question. What's our common enemy?
Well, it was the virus of unknown origin.
Well, it was the Soviets for 50 years, 70 years?
It is again, thank goodness.
Oh, good night.
Don't look at the Chinese, look at the Russians. The Russians are the real bad guys.
Yeah. Well, I posted that promo video, the trolling promo video from Russia that they were broadcasting in Europe.
Yeah.
It's like, move to Russia.
Well, yeah. I mean, you'll have heat this winter if you do.
You'll have heat, and look, our economy is what was the word?
It'd be like Californians moving to Texas. It'll just be Europeans moving to Russia.
Yeah, no, that's how they presented it. It's like,
100%.
well, actually, California and Florida have been doing that. They've been trolling each other too.
Big time.
California and Florida, right? Yeah, there's
so petty.
Texas.
It's so juvenile.
Where like their governors are taking out ads in the competing states.
Yeah.
It's like,
no, Texas and Washington D.C. have been trolling each other.
There's that too. I saw that the immigrants, they were going to start busing them up to Chicago, but the immigrants said no.
Right.
They were happy to go to D.C. or to New York,
Sure.
but they didn't want to go to Chicago.
Weird.
Like, how's that? What was I going to say? You said it was petty or stupid. I mean,
Juvenile,
it is, but
not stupid. It's just juvenile.
Yeah, but it's
pitiful.
But like Mrs. Turpin, but that's actually who we are. We are
Correct.
petty and juvenile people
By nature. Yeah, we
are.
100%.
Yeah. Right. So the anthropology here, which is one of our favorite subjects to reveal, right? Because we're so dishonest about our anthropology, we think of ourselves more highly than we ought.
Right.
And Flannery tears everybody down, really, in this.
Well, and to go back to the analogy of addiction, hitting your bottom, for example, to quote the podcast, hitting bottom is essentially when you have no more wiggle room, meaning no more BS excuses, no more angles to work, nobody to exploit that's going to feed your addiction.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't have to be this catastrophic, you're living in an alley and you're homeless kind of situation. Everybody's bottoms. I knew a 17-year-old kid. He hit bottom after a party. He went to a house party, and he hit bottom, and he went to AA. He made his mom. He made his mom drive him to AA the next morning. And we're just like, you are the most amazing human being that I have ever met. Because when I was 17, I would have never thought that I had an alcohol problem.
I mean, it could be somebody just gets demoted at work. Just as simple as that.
Exactly. It's just
their whole life is built on that, moving up the ladder, and then they get demoted.
You have no wiggle room anymore. There's no angles. There's no excuses. There's no justification. This is it. You're out. You're out of time. You're out of tomorrows. You're out. And so you cry out, God help me, or whatever it is. And when the veil is pulled back, that you're full of it. You're full of excuses. You're full of justifications. You're full of lies about yourself. And again, therapeutically, we call that the ego, the projection of the person that you want to be versus the person you are. Yeah. The shadow self, as Jung talked about. But really all Flannery is saying is that when God reveals the truth to you about who you are, it's going to come through trauma. There's going to be struggle and suffering. You're going to try and justify yourself because you don't want God to show you the truth, which is why people don't go to church, because they fear the preacher who tells the truth. According to God's word, I should say. And we avoid people that tell us the truth about ourselves when we're set on dishonesty. Right? We can say, you and I can say, and I say this all the time, my entire life is full of criticism, beginning to end, because every day that I go to the gym, I'm getting criticized. I'm doing something wrong. And even if my coach isn't saying you're doing that wrong, fix that, one of my teammates is showing me that I'm doing something incorrectly. It's like when you go to AA or you go to group, it's the same thing. Is like, we're not here to BS each other. We're here to put it all on the table. And because we're all in the same boat, no one's going to be drilling holes. So go ahead. Versus when you're around people that, like she said, like, I can't talk to these black people because you can talk at them, you can't talk with them. Well, to be blunt, I'm that way about a lot of people. It doesn't have anything to do with the color of skin. I'm around people, I'm like, I can't talk with these people.
Right.
I can talk at them.
You would ultimately probably sacrifice that relationship.
Absolutely, 100%.
Because they can't handle it. They don't want to. No.
Right.
Or you think they can't handle it anyway.
For whatever reason, you just either, like, for myself, again, speaking anecdotally, I just don't want to put the responsibility on them for understanding what I'm about or what I'm trying to communicate. And once I recognize they don't want to have this conversation with me, I stop. That's cool.
Right. Like the teller at the bank or the checkout
100%.
lady. I mean, you're not going to.
Or just people at church. When they come to talk to you, like again, going back to the Genesis Bible study, I made the quip. I don't think you guys are ready to have this conversation yet, but when you are, we can do it. And they gave me so much crap about that. I'm like, fine, let's talk about the Nephilim. Let's do this. Let's talk about cosmology. And you know what? That was my sin, because we had a robust 30-minute conversation about how important cosmology is.
Yeah. I had somebody ask me this.
Completely open to the conversation.
They were just casually just like, well, how was your summer? And the right response is, we had a pretty good time. And instead I was like, actually, my daughter was in the hospital for a month.
Yeah.
No, for 3 weeks almost.
Yeah.
And she was sick for 5 weeks. It's like, it wasn't, actually, it was kind of hard. It wasn't easy. Like, and I don't think she wanted that at all.
Yeah, absolutely. But then you're giving them the opportunity. Do you want to have this conversation?
And she did. And in
That's
fairness, then there was compassion and
what?
conversation.
Now you know what really was the high point of my summer, or low point. And we're gonna part now. You asked me a question, I gave you an honest answer. I didn't go into detail about it. This is the thing that affected me. How about you? Versus, tell me more.
Yeah.
Okay, let's have that conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
But to Flannery's point then is that all of these conversations, the conversating, it all comes with subtext, and it comes with judgment.
Right.
And I've noted this in Bible studies before. For those who watch the live stream on Sundays, I've noted this on the podcast. I cannot stand having to figure out what the subtext of someone's conversation with me is about. Tell me what you think. Say what you mean what you say. Just be blunt. Be honest. Be simple. Just tell me what you're actually about. It's not going to hurt my feelings. I'm not going to be scarred by this.
So maybe you would like Green Lady Attorney at Law.
Maybe.
Because she's very blunt and honest about what the subtext of the show is.
True enough.
You just don't agree with it, and it's dumb. So
I was going to point out, Green Lady is simply an avatar for the writers of the show who are projecting their life history and their anecdotes into the mouth of a fictional character and destroying everything that fictional character actually stands for within the Marvel universe.
I appreciated Critical Drinker.
He nailed it.
But when he tried to say, like, here's what you could have done to actually make this story interesting and compelling. You just bunged up the narrative. You didn't write it well.
It's not like you don't have decades of stories that you could have drawn from. It's like the Thor: Love and Thunder. They drew from one of the most famous story arcs in the history of Thor comics.
Okay.
And then interjected the message into it, which completely bunged up the entire narrative. The narrative was there was like 2 or 3 combined. But
I didn't see the movie yet.
Nor will I.
I was going to.
But the point is that they kind of slapped together 2 or 3 really famous storylines within the Thor comic book. And like the God Killer, which is a more recent storyline. Just that alone is compelling, right? The thing about Jane Foster dying from cancer and sacrificing her life to save Thor's life. That in and of itself is a compelling story, and it covers multiple issues. You can stretch that into a 2-hour movie very easily.
Sure.
But instead they said, well, we're not going to respect the material. We're not going to respect the fans, and we're going to interject our politics and our personal experiences or the way that we feel about certain things into the narrative and force you to feel our pain, feel our victimization, feel our mock oppression. And it always comes off as false. It always comes off as derivative, and it always comes off as preachy. because it's not intelligently written, not intelligently acted, not intelligently directed. And as a consequence, you look at it and go, ugh, this feels like a CW show.
Yeah. Whereas like with this narrative, I mean, I think you could clearly, I mean, Flannery probably is identifying with Mrs. Turpin. She's putting the same judgment that's being brought on Mrs. Turpin on herself in the writing. She's not separating herself from it and projecting judgment on others.
Well, can you write honestly? Can you preach honestly? Can you teach honestly if you try to separate yourself from the material, like we would talk about when you read Judges as a good example? You try to separate yourself morally from the judges.
We're so much better than they are.
We're so much better than these people, these ignorant, primitive savages. Can you honestly teach the text then? Is there anything to be taught of God's word when you're trying to separate yourself from these sinners and say, well, I know I'm a sinner, but at least I'm not like these sinners.
Right. I laugh about that because it's, reading about like the construction of the temple. And like, we don't have,
especially in Haggai.
Well, right. But I'm just thinking about just the construction of it, just bare like the craftsmanship of it. Sure. It's like we don't even have the capacity. I mean, you have to maybe find some Amish people that might be able to pull it off. But like the stonemasons, the wood crafting, the tapestries, like we can't even do these things. It's
because we don't have the ethos anymore.
What, to make things with our hands?
We don't have a code of behavior. We don't have a code of conduct. We don't have an ethic around building things. Just get it done.
Oh, to last. Yeah.
Effective. Right.
The IKEA church, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, like Haggai, you guys started working on this 7 days a week for 3 months. Then what happened after 3 months? This is just, I got stuff to do, man. I can't.
Yeah, Zechariah does that too.
Yeah.
Like they're all so excited under Nehemiah, right? And we're laying the groundwork. We're
doing this.
And then it's like, when did it actually get finished? Like 70 years?
It took 70 years. And
they didn't do anything for like, what, 15 or 20 years?
Haggai. In Zechariah, he says, I have to use a foreign people who are going to bring their money and their treasure to build my temple because you people are worthless.
Isn't that something?
And your children will enjoy the temple, but you're all going to die. I'm not going to allow you to set foot in this new temple. And you're like, that's profound.
It is.
You like you pointed out, they possess the craftsmanship, they possess the talent, the skills, and the abilities to do it, but they don't possess the faith. And back to the earlier point then, we're Israelites. We're the children of God. We're the sons of Jacob. Yeah, in name only. But as far as faith, the thing that actually matters, you have none.
Right.
And then when the prophet comes along, when the vineyard owner's son comes along and says, hey, this isn't how we do this. This isn't what God said.
You neither know the word of God nor the power therein, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, well, if you try to separate yourself out from that exact statement, you know neither the word of God nor the power therein, I have nothing to say to you because there's nothing to be said. It's nonsense. It's gibberish. My coach, who's not a Christian, has more appreciation for my God-given respect for my wife than other Christians do.
Yeah.
Because he respects me.
Well,
at the very least.
But your coach is part of a discipline.
that too,
that respect is part of that discipline, right? Like, you have to respect one another to be able to do the things you do.
Right.
I mean, even just your very base level, right? The life of the other, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the point that Flannery's getting after here too, is she takes that omniscient view, that psychological view. I can tell you what's going on inside their heart so that you understand. I'm not writing about Mrs. Turpin, for example, from the perspective of someone who's above me. Like Mrs. Turpin would have to look up to see me. No, I'm saying I see Mrs. Turpin at Mass every Sunday.
Right.
I see Claude every Saturday night. I see Claude. Right. The family that came by to visit me at my house and wanted to talk to me about my peahens. Those are the 3 women sitting on the chairs in the doctor's office with their dumb little boy. Like, I see these people every day, but I'm not above them. Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking about this situation. I was a young elder before I went to seminary. And there was a family in the congregation, that I looked down on.
Sure.
I think he was actually a sanitation expert, right? As they say. And the family, I mean, they were the unkept family, the kids were messy and the smelly and all that kind of stuff. And I looked down at them. They would always sit next to us. That was part of the challenge. And the kids' noses were running all over the place. And this is all the judgment, right? And then I had occasion actually to bump into the pastor there now at that congregation, at one of these pastor things. And so I just asked, I was just asking, like, are these people, I just want to know who was still in the congregation, who moved on, that kind of thing. And were they still there? And they've been through divorce and kind of messy stuff. And I basically ended up confessing to them because it's like, I didn't even know what I was doing at the time. But you need that. Sometimes you need to just be disconnected this way. Like, and in this case, through a narrative, to look and say, wait a minute, am I doing this? Are we the baddies here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we cast the same kind of judgment and aspersions on people? Right. And then ultimately, do we fail to see them as, Flannery really gets helpfully to the gospel part here at the end.
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute, they're all baptized, saved, brought into the heavenly host, walking into the heavenly throne. And
because
do we not see that?
Flannery's not poor white trash, right? She comes from
not at all, no.
A middle-class family. She gets to go to college as a young woman.
Right.
She's educated. She's articulate. All these things, right? And so again, she is of the same category as Mrs. Turpin, as far as her social status, and she knows who's reading this. It's not going to be poor white trash that read her novels or her short stories. It's not the black folks, the sharecroppers. They're not reading her stories necessarily. She knows who she's writing to.
To the Mrs. Turpins.
Yeah, she's preaching to the Mrs. Turpins.
Right.
In the South and in the North too.
Sure.
Because she certainly has less than flattering things to say about people in the North and their supposed lack of racism.
Holier than thou. Yeah.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, look, we have a black person we have James Baldwin at our dinner party. It's like, ooh, you have a black man at your cocktail party. How very enlightened and progressive of you. Versus like, hey, you should come to Georgia. We have black people everywhere.
So we said there's not really a preacher, but there is. And so who's the preacher in this? It ends up being this demon-possessed girl.
I was going to say it's the young woman at the beginning. Yeah, the college-educated girl.
Or at least, seizure-prone.
The
possessed
girl.
Of some
whatever.
kind.
Yeah.
Seizures and being possessed often are equated in the Bible.
Yeah, that's true.
And then her confession, though, right? If we want to just kind of ideologically work through it here. Call me a hog again from hell. Call me the warthog from hell.
Right.
Right. And then what is it? Who do you think that you are?
Right.
Think you are. That's her confession. Yeah.
Here we go. So 2 weeks ago, I preached a sermon, and I quoted Hosea chapter 2, verse 24, where God says, you're all whores and your children are all bastards. And I quoted that in the text because I was talking about how words are violence, right? I was preaching.
Right.
And again, this Sunday is going to be another burner for those of you listening. So last Sunday was a baptism. I pulled back on the throttle.
I was going to send you the article about how most preachers in America only preach the law and don't preach the gospel.
Nice.
Anyway, keep going.
I just noted that it was God's word who said that. And
yeah, I know.
Anyways, my senior elder came over and brought us some tomatoes yesterday and made a little quip. He's like, got the sermon done? I go, yeah. I got it's done. He goes, I hope it's not as tame as last Sunday's sermon. I'm like, well, and he's like, I know there's a baptism. There are people in church, and he's like, but and I like, I can't give you dessert every Sunday, Doug. He's like, I know, but you can't talk about whores and bastard kids every Sunday in the sermon, but this Sunday maybe go back to that. The point being is this: is within the context of the sermon, I wasn't calling them whores and bastard children, but I was.
Right.
And in every sermon, I'm doing the same thing that Flannery does here, which is, because basically learned it from her and others, which is that this is true of you, which is why when I say it, you go, I think he's insulting us right now. I think he's being mean to us right now. It's like, no, I'm not actually talking to you. And that's why I said what I said and then said, and by the way, I didn't say that. It's in Hosea chapter 2. Because I know, your church. I know my church. I know what my people think. They've told me. I have a relationship with them. I know how they hear the word. And it goes back to that point of when you preach the law, people think you're being mean to them and you're bullying them and you're attacking them.
You're the Mrs. Turpin. Yeah.
Mrs. Turpin. But then when you give them the gospel, they're saying, yeah, but let's go back to this thing you just said from Hosea chapter 2. And you weren't referring to us like that, were you? And I'm like, you do realize that again, I didn't refer to you that way. Jesus did. And number two, notice how everything that I said after that was about how Jesus, being God for you, forgives it and redeems you and washes you clean, just like God does with the Gomers of the world.
Right.
You're so locked into, well, I can't hear that about myself because I don't want to know that about myself, that I'm simply going to stare at the pigs and look at all these, look at all the shoats around the big fat sow and not draw draw the parallels between, oh, this is a metaphor for me. Like, this is how I run my life. I'm the fat sow, and all the shoats around me are my husband, the black people, the people in the dark. Like, everything is around me. I've gathered them all up like suckling pigs. But that's not me. I'm not a warthog from hell.
Except God just sprayed me in my eye with the water hose.
And then God just sprayed me in the eye with water. Exactly. So you get the metaphor for baptism. But that's the point, is that if you preach the law lawfully, it cuts the bone right to the marrow. But then when you preach the gospel evangelically, only those whom the Spirit has opened to hear that word will receive the law as good news.
Yeah. We were talking about this in regards to summer church attendance and how frustrating it is.
Sure.
You mentioned it earlier in the show too,
Yeah.
but I was just kind of lamenting this in conversation that, I know what people want me to do.
Mm-hmm.
They want me to be the heavy hand of the law, right?
Sure.
The hammer, and just
Sure.
come down on them and say, you're an idiot. You should have been in church. What are you doing? Going and enjoying God's creation,
Right.
instead of coming to church. Like, where's your priorities here?
Yeah.
You couldn't offset it so that you were back Saturday night instead of coming back Sunday
sure.
night. Whatever.
That
I take the
assumes
day off
free
of
will,
work.
but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I know. So that's what people want, and like, this is not how I understand the third commandment.
Mm-hmm.
I know you can read it like, thou shalt.
Gladly hear and learn.
Right, exactly. Gladly hear and learn. Now, where's that come from? Well, I think it comes from the gospel as a gift, right?
Sure,
And
exactly.
really the whole divine service in every way
Right.
that the gospel's manifest there, right?
Right.
From absolution all the way through the supper and the final blessing. But then on the other hand, it's like, but it's not effective. Like you said, some hear that and they're like, thanks, Pastor, I needed to hear that. I'll be back.
Right.
Most, I don't know if it's most, but it seems like a lot,
Mm-hmm.
are just like, well, that's not very compelling at all.
Right.
So we were talking about the why question, like why come to our church? Why come back to church? You haven't been to church.
Right.
And then we put forward these really what we think are very positive, optimistic, and gifted stuff, right? True freedom and forgiveness, full and complete forgiveness of sins. Wouldn't that great? Your conscience is set free.
Yeah.
Eternal hope. And folks are like, why?
Right.
I need to learn how to improve my life. I need you to tell me what to do.
Well, back to your point, to use the analogy again, there are far more addicts than there are addicts in recovery.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a fair way to put it.
There are far more people who will say, but I'm not an addict, you're an addict. Whatever that is that you can't give up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those who are in recovery, who sit around that table or speak with their sponsor or whatever it might be, however they maintain their sobriety, when you say to them, hey, we need to talk about your addiction. We need to talk about the consequences of your behavior. We need to address the people that you've affected, and we need to address your responsibility for their hurt and harm.
Yeah.
When you're in recovery, when you first start off, you're a raw nerve, right? You're just white knuckling the dashboard because it's hard, because you're not used to this.
Right.
And it's very hard to confront yourself and the things that you did while you were using, because that's how you escaped responsibility for the consequences of your behavior was, I'll just take more drugs. And so now all of a sudden you're clean and sober, and it's just a mountain of consequences that you've been ignoring for sometimes decades.
Right.
And you're told, hey, just one piece of trash at a time. Don't try and take the whole mountain. Don't eat the whole whale. Just one piece at a time, one starfish at a time. And so that's what you do. And at first you're just like, oh, okay, how about just the little ones? How about, hey, you remember that time I lied to you? I'm really sorry. Hey, you remember that time I put a gun to your head and took $500 from you? Yeah, we're not going to deal with that. That's too much. That's too much. The statute of limitations isn't up yet. Let's just deal with this one over here. I lied to you. Okay.
Right.
But then as you get into sobriety, as you get time, as you get the tools, and you're getting more and more honest with yourself, because again, you're free, and you realize by making amends to that person I lied to, it made me feel like free, like I can breathe again. There's not this weight on my chest. So now I'm going to go talk to this person. Exactly. Okay. So now I'm going to go talk to this person. I stole their paycheck and I lied to them about it. And you build yourself up to, hey, when I put that gun in your mouth and I took the drugs and the money, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I'm asking you for forgiveness, right? You don't just jump out the gate and do that stuff. You have to build up to it. But that's the law, is that you can sit around the table and point the finger at yourself. And then I think the ultimate boss level for a law is when you can laugh at yourself under the law. You can laugh at how idiotic and absurd and cliched you are when it comes to the law.
Because truly self-deprecating.
Right. Is that the hardest thing for me, and you know this because you know me long enough, it's only been very recently that I've been able to laugh at myself. And more specifically,
I would say that you're even like honest.
Well, more specifically, I can laugh when you make fun of me. Before I could make fun of myself if I made fun of myself.
This is most certainly true. Thank you.
But now, again, a part of my sobriety, and this is, 1998, we're talking, this is a lot of work,
yes, is
not taking myself so seriously, but also that when other people make fun of me, that's actually a form of endearment. Like, I like you enough, and I'm intimate enough with you that I feel comfortable making fun of you the same way that you've been making fun of me the whole time.
Right.
And so therefore asking for that law preaching, it has to come with the freedom that comes through the absolution to say, since I'm free of this, pour it on, man. Go ahead, pour it on me, because I've been absolved. And this is what we.
So this is Ecclesiastes. Like you can't get to Ecclesiastes as a young person. It doesn't even make sense to you.
No.
That was in.
Yeah.
Was that in the Shia interview? I think it was, because it was one of the books on tapes. Or no, it was the other interview you sent me, where he had gotten the Bible on tape and the sermons, the ones, and then he never listened to them, and then he finally opened the first one. He opened was Ecclesiastes.
Was that the comedian?
Like, yeah.
That one I sent? Yeah.
And it's like, it doesn't make sense until you're in that position where you've been through life, you've been through hell in a lot of ways,
right?
Like, because otherwise you're just like vanity, all is vanity. What are you talking about? There's a lot of things I love in this world. There's a lot of things that you can cherish and hold on to.
100%. And I think
until
to the point too, then, because this has come up in the past, and I think it needs to be addressed, kind of reviewed from time to time. Because Flannery had lupus, and because she suffered a lot, she was able to understand struggle, and she understood pain, not just physical pain, but just the existential pain. Like, why me, Lord? And
that's why I said it sounds autobiographical.
Right. And you and I have struggled and suffered and carried weight that the Lord has put upon us in our own vocations. That does not make you a better or worse gospel preacher based on how much you suffered or struggled.
Or more or less a sinner either.
Or more or less a sinner. But what it does do is it prepares you to go into a vocation where the Lord is saying, because you've been in this dark place and you are a light in the dark now, I'm going to send you in there. Whereas somebody who has not suffered that or struggled through that, you're not going to be sent there. He's not going to send a non-addict into a place to talk to addicts necessarily, at least not unaccompanied. He's not going to be like, okay, here, go do this thing that you're completely unfamiliar with without any tools or any resources or any other people walking with you, versus I'm going to send you in there because you've been there. And you can walk in and you can walk out, and I can give you the word and I'm going to be with you in the midst of that, versus there are places that I can't go, that he won't send me, because I would walk in and go, I have no idea how to deal with this. I don't even know how to address this.
I think we've talked about this before. I don't know if it was in this iteration of our experiences together or a previous one, but it was quite scandalous. It was in my hometown that this husband and wife team, they set up a church right next to the strip club, and she had been a stripper.
Okay.
And and he had been somehow involved as well. Right. I don't know what his role was.
Sure.
Right. But they did this intentionally because they wanted to minister to these people, who came from a life that they were. And it was quite scandalous because, like, you can't minister in a strip club. You can't go in there and preach the gospel to these people there because of how, especially.
There's certain laws also that prohibit you from doing stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. Right. I think they did it out front. However it worked, it doesn't matter. It's just like abortion clinics, right? I mean, some of the most effective preachers are people who have actually, unfortunately have had abortions or parents had considered aborting them or whatever. They have, but to people who haven't been through that, it's almost like abhorrent. Like I don't even want to be in that space. I don't even want to be around people involved in these things.
Yeah. Go back to Job's friends, since it's in the text.
Oh,
Job's friends come and talk to him, and it's obvious from reading that. You don't have to be a theologian to understand and grasp very quickly. These three guys have no idea what they're talking about, and they have no idea what Job's going through.
They've never lost anything like that.
Yeah, they talk like people who have watched movies about this stuff, but have never actually experienced it. And again, it doesn't make you more or less of a sinner, like you said. It doesn't make you more or less equipped to preach the gospel. You can walk into any scenario and preach the gospel. You don't have to understand or sympathize or have any kind of empathy towards people to just preach the gospel. You and I do that all the time. I mean, most of the people in our church, we don't share their experiences. But come Sunday, we show up and preach the gospel, and the Holy Spirit does what he does.
Well, and we often preach towards their experiences and not even know it. And they tell us later.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, I'd appreciate next time if you didn't talk about me in the sermon. You're like, I wasn't even thinking about you when I wrote that.
You really hit a nerve. I'm like, ooh, sorry. Didn't know that.
100%. There's been some Sundays where you're like, you see someone and you're like, oh, I can't preach this sermon now. This is too close. I didn't realize they were coming to church.
No, there's
today.
that too. Yeah, that's
And
happened.
then other times you get out of the pulpit and go, I didn't say anything relevant in that sermon at all. Like, that just went over everybody's head. And then afterwards they're like, man, that really hit hard. You're like, really? Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Holy Spirit. That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Human nature, again, to judge others rather than judge yourself, and to ask others the question, you don't think I'm this way, do you? You're not actually looking for honesty. You're looking for affirmation.
Well, and I think the other thing here too is that, as we were talking about with literacy, biblical literacy, is, whether it's a preacher or it's a parent or whatever, I mean, to speak from God's word, which is really the only true perspective on things.
Yeah.
Right? Because everything else is conditioned. Well, even our reading of God's word, unfortunately, often gets conditioned by our experiences
absolutely.
too. Right? And can, even to the point of twisting and contorting it, but let it be brutally honest with you and speak in the way that it speaks, like you're saying from Hosea.
Yeah.
It makes us uncomfortable. Maybe we need to be uncomfortable
Well, it's
with
supposed
that.
to, because God doesn't care about your feelings.
What?
Facts don't care about feelings. Yeah.
Now you're quoting a Jew. Look at you.
I know, right? How dare you? Not only does his presence trigger people, but just his very words. So juvenile.
It is. Speaking of racism.
Well, but again, I recognize the juvenility of saying a certain person being in the building triggers me when the same sentiment is expressed when you say words and people are like, hey, those words trigger me. It's like, really, words?
Mm-hmm. It's the same idea. Yeah.
These words are like 2,500 years old.
Right.
These
Well, we
words
had
are-
this with the text. Like we can't, we'd probably get kicked off of YouTube or maybe get admonished severely by our institutional authority and be like, but it's right there. Like, what are we ashamed of?
Right.
Well, people might misunderstand. Well,
Might.
this is part of like real communication.
Yeah. Freedom
People
is messy.
always misunderstand.
Free communication and conversation is messy.
Although with a very black background and red highlights and standing
Sure.
at a throne altar thing,
That's a tip off, yeah. Snope.
I don't think people were very confused by it.
Really?
I don't.
You think it was
so.
kind of in your face?
I think so. I think it was very clearly, and very evocative.
My friend is referring to a recent speech given by our current president that was not only fiery, but also very well produced. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, well,
It's
that's been a token of this current administration is, they like to hire the television producers and
They
film
really
producers.
do. Self-admitted. We're not making it up. They admitted to it. Yeah.
Right.
Admit to it.
Hey,
yeah.
look, I mean, if everybody uses Bernays, and there's no way
Yes.
around it.
No.
The insights of Bernays, everybody uses it. We all doesn't matter.
If it isn't broke, I mean,
Well, I heard a commentary from a ad convention, like
Yeah.
advertisers, like Mad Men, getting together, and they're like, "This is the best thing ever. This season, we've been selling more ads than we've ever sold before." It's like, go Donald, because the two parties are going after each other, but then
Right.
the people within the parties are going after each other.
Exactly.
So they're doing ads against each other.
Right.
For these primaries, and we're gonna have an extra AFC game or something. I don't remember. They were talking about
It
football.
leads, baby. Yeah.
It's like, wow. I mean, this is great. And you're like, oh,
Which is
okay.
now that we're talking about it, and I just threw that out there because it's a common idiom in mass
Oh,
media.
yeah. Say it again.
Bleeds, it leads. If it bleeds, it leads.
Mm-hmm.
It's been around
That's
for a long
newspaper.
time.
That's from newspaper.
Newspaper
Yeah.
talk. Which is ironic because we talk about the blood of Christ every Sunday, and most people could care less. It's like, if it bleeds, it leads, unless it's about Jesus, in which case we really don't care.
Right.
That's a different kind of bleeding. We don't want to talk about that. Because that kind of bleeding is self-sacrificial versus I want to sacrifice the other person. I want their blood, right? And that's, again, goes back to the point of Mrs. Turpin, is everybody around her is guilty of something. Everybody is condemnable, except for her. Until the very end, when it's revealed to her, you think you're first, you think you're the sow around which all the other shoats gather, but you're not. You're the last in the kingdom. Again, like I said, you're singing in tune. You're just singing the wrong song.
Right. What's
Which is
interesting?
funny because at the beginning, you pointed this out the last episode. At the very beginning of the story, they're talking about black people in a very derogatory term while completing an old Negro spiritual that's playing on the radio.
Right.
So it's almost like a callback to that first part. It's like she has a beautiful voice, she's singing in tune, and then at the very end, it's like, oh, I didn't see that before.
Yeah. I don't, and there's nobody in the story for her. Like we said, there's no preacher. But she is brought to repentance, right?
She is.
Right. And so there.
Well, would she even be called to repent if she went to church on Sunday?
It does. I don't think so.
I doubt highly that Mrs. Turpin and Claude go to a black church on Sunday.
Oh, where they have a deep understanding of the way sin is manifest in the world, you mean?
I've talked about this too. Again, going back to my life in Louisiana when we were out in the country and we were out in Keachai, and the black church, the Black Baptist church was like right behind the store. They had no air conditioning. It was like literally a stereotypical white church that probably held like 100 people at most, probably like 80. Yeah. And it had a door at the front and a door at the back. And it was literally a square where trees had been cleared out. It was just like a perfectly square area. And it was just right off the road. And then you go down the road a little bit, take a right. That's my Papa Johnny's, my friend's grandpa's right down there. So you'd be down the road at his farm. You could see the black church from his land. And on Sunday, you could hear him singing, hooting, hollering, clapping, stomping on the old hardwood floor, right? And then and I'm looking at this and hearing this from growing up watching movies and TV shows where this is depicted. I'm like, that's real. That's like real, right? And then we go into town, go back to my friend's dad's house, which was in the suburbs, and the Episcopal church is right down the street. And it's an enormous Episcopal church, exactly like all the other ones. White as the driven snow, right? And quiet and stately. Completely different. It's like two different worlds almost. It's like I had crossed through some dimensional membrane. And again, I doubt Mrs. Turpin ever set foot in a black church on Sunday. And so would her preacher even say to her, especially in the 50s and the early 60s, would her preacher say, you're right. We should actually go to the black church on Sunday because them and all the poor white trash and all the freaks and all the lunatics, they're going to get into heaven ahead of us. So maybe we should just make one big congregation out of all these people. Is that really what she's going to hear if she goes to her preacher and tells, hey, I got this revelation?
I'm also struck by your illustration. I mean, their worship practice is, okay, so it's indifferent. It's an indifferent matter. We talk about this all the time. But on the other hand...
intellectually, it's indifferent. Let's put it that way.
The psalmist is very clear about, the hooting and the hollering. That's what the psalmist actually says to do.
David strips naked and dances through the streets of Jerusalem.
Right. And you've got I know we kind of mock the loud clanging cymbals and stuff, but it does sound like it's a pretty noisy affair.
It is.
According to the psalmist, what they describe. And it's also commanded, right? I mean, it's like make a joyous noise.
Joyous noise, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. So in that regard, I mean, I think it's indicative, at least, possibly, of their... what do you want to say? Their submission to the Word of God.
Yeah.
Right? And the quiet Episcopalian church, not speaking of Episcopalians in general or in specific either.
But in this anecdote, yeah.
Yeah, but in this anecdote, it's like, do you really take God's Word seriously? And maybe they do. They sing out really well or whatever. But in your example, it's like the quiet, the stoic ones. It's like...
I would sit on the back porch and drink my coffee on Sunday morning at my friend's dad's house, and I could not hear anything at the church. You heard the bell ring, and that's it. Yeah. You heard nothing. I'm like 2 miles away, a mile and a half away, and I can hear the preaching and the singing. And like I said, I hear feet stomping on hardwood floors. And again, enthusiasm...
Maybe it's enthusiasm, or...
No, I'm just saying enthusiasm of worship isn't indicative then of faith, but rather out of this experience, this congregation expresses their worship this way. Out of this experience, this other congregation expresses it this way. It's a completely different experience. And so talking with a pastor who may or may not be open to alternative views, or to simply say, okay, but where in God's Word are you reading this? And she says, well, what about the parable of the first and the last? Like, what about this parable, Pastor? Because don't we look at these people as if they're not only the last, but like subhuman? Don't we like judge them as being unable to hold a conversation with us? Like, doesn't that indicate, like in a very real way, that we consider them to be the lowest at the table?
Yeah.
Are they, or are they not our Christian brothers and sisters?
Yeah. And her breakout here, Mrs. Turpin, where she breaks out, and it's a very emotional, impassioned, plea, is probably something she's never done in church before. Is your point?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Whereas she might have, in a different cultural setting.
Sure.
And there's something, we don't want to focus on the emotion, but we recognize that there is an emotional response to God's word.
Yeah.
And if there isn't, did you hear? That's the question.
We just talked about it. There are some times when someone will just say flat out, I hate your preaching.
Yeah.
I hate it.
I appreciate
why
that.
Why do you hate it? Because it makes me angry. Well, what about it makes you angry? You're always attacking us. You're always judging us. You're always pointing your finger at us and talking about how bad we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, I've never once said that you are bad people. I said you're sinful and evil. There's a difference. Mm-hmm. And by the way, the blood of Jesus covers all that.
Right. And so you can actually work with that.
Right.
Whereas the passive, almost apathetic.
That's nice. I can take it or leave it.
Right.
It's the same as everybody else is preaching. I'm like, really?
I had to force myself with this. I mean, initially because I wasn't willing, but to consider, what do we call this? Emotional quotient, right? That's what the psychologists call it today. I don't know if that's actually real or not, but it doesn't really matter. It's just a way of quantifying things. And like when I say, the Lord bless you and keep you, if I heard those words in my ears, what would be my response? And I'm like, I'm going to let my face, my expression, my physical character, like actually reflect what I'm saying.
Yeah. Right.
And we're so like, averse to performative stuff, which is true. But on the other hand, we don't actually let ourselves respond in the way that the word gives.
Just let it be. There's some Sundays where I'm practically coming out of the pulpit at people.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other Sundays when I'm just doing my job.
Right. I've had this happen with hymns or whatever, when I'm just like, I have to bow my head. I'm just like, because the words compel me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just laughing because last week at the baptism, I posted on Instagram and Facebook. Somebody was taking a picture of the font and stuff, and I leaned in and stuck my face in there.
I saw that. You photobombed it.
And he texted that to me during the service, and so I used my iPad, of course. So the alert dropped, and I opened it. I almost texted back. And I caught myself because we were right in the middle of the sermon hymn. And I'm like, it'd probably be bad form if pastor was texting with somebody in the congregation right now. While
we all know pastors that do that. Okay.
Yeah, we do, don't we? Which is why I don't do that.
You can. Anyway, I'm not.
I know. Yeah, you can mute that. I know.
Okay. All right.
I may or may not have been. Yeah, opening the. I may have been. Oh, I didn't have to open it, but I may have. Because I was distracted, because that's my...
Prog metal church hymns. I just don't know. If you can't sing along with it, I'm not a big fan, but that's okay.
Seems like a contradiction, actually.
But it can be reflective. I like Neil Morse. He was a prog guy. Okay. Then he converted to some kind of... I think more Baptist-y or something. It doesn't really matter. He's got some interesting albums where yes, they're very overtly theological now, because he's a new convert, effectively. But, I think it's a nice reflection on the scriptures. So,
right.
Okay, fair enough.
So question for the listeners, both the live stream folks and for the podcast folks. Do you want us to read colonial sermons? We talked about that in relation to Hawthorne and Melville.
American context stuff, yeah.
American context, where, the roots of American evangelical Christianity. Or do you want us to read atheists? We talked about that, reading more Nietzsche, Feuerbach, and others. Heidegger, yeah. Who... Wow, he went crazy mystical. We could even read Jung's quote-unquote, statements of faith.
I didn't know how much Heidegger affected this guy Dugan, whose daughter was killed. Yeah. That Dugan's this huge Heidegger guy, and then that's influenced a lot of Russian kind of understanding of
interesting
faith and state and all that.
Yeah, so we can do more colonial stuff, because that would be torturous yet enlightening, let's put it that way.
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, there might be decent stuff there.
We could. Well, didn't we go into Scientology?
No.
I thought early on we talked about Scientology. We dipped into that.
We haven't done sci-fi. I mean, sci-fi would be a lot of fun.
That's true. We could do We could do that for Advent or Lent. Maybe we could do
some science fiction.
Read the Gospel according to Star Wars, so we can finally put that in its grave where it belongs. There's some.
Well, I mean, you could even do like kind of pious sci-fi, but.
Yeah, they're all Gnostic.
We
could read the Paralander Chronicles by C.S. Lewis. We haven't read Lewis for a while either, though. And I was just talking about him last
Those are some of our most popular episodes, yeah.
That Hideous Strength is a great book.
That's less sci-fi, though. I mean, that's less space, isn't it?
I know,
there's no
Brown
space
and I actually agree on something, so we're going to take a moment to appreciate that.
Voting for colonial
stuff.
Ists. Okay.
So, yeah, Gillespie and I'll probably decide at about 9:55 next Friday.
That's about right.
We'll do, but Yeah, if you have a preference, just shoot us an email, shoot us a DM or whatever, and let us know. I'm open to either way.
We get all the emails. We get all the DMs.
Yes, we do.
Whether
they get
we
forwarded
respond
to
or
us
not.
by 1517.
It's not often a good response.
There's a
anymore.
lot. I want to go back and do early church stuff again. That was
Yeah.
fun. Speaking of sci-fi, and but the colonial stuff, I think, I don't know.
It seems like it's not part of like our consideration. We just don't. We're not hearing the preachers that are preaching to the people, forming who we are
Right.
today.
Well, that was the thing about that revivalist series that we did, was how similar they were, but also how contextual it was, based on where they were at that time and who they were preaching to. But there were themes, right? Were anti-institution, anti-vestments and sacraments, very pro-emotionalism, by the way, and that kind of stuff. So that's definitely an option. The atheist stuff is always fun, just because.
Yeah, but we were talking about before Great Awakening.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do need to be. I think didn't they shut that down last year? Did they reopen
For COVID?
that? Yeah, I know they shut it down for COVID, which is
They probably
funny.
could shut it down for monkeypox now.
I was gonna say, well, yeah, but I'm like, it's a bacchanal, people. Like,
It's fairly obvious what happens here.
You
Yes.
obviously don't care all that much about your physical wellness, so
Just
but I might get a bacterial infection. It's like, honey, okay, Sure. So I hope you enjoyed our Flannery O'Connor stuff. This is the second dip that we've done with Flannery. Otherwise, we should definitely do C.S. Lewis next week. Maybe we'll do that as a palate cleanser and then dive into the colonial stuff.
What did we do from Lewis? I don't remember. Somebody have to go search on that.
Did we do Mere Christianity or not?
No.
Because we really need to do Mere Christianity. I love that book. That's why that literally...
One, it's easy. It's easy to break down because it's, it's so episodic.
It is. Well, that's the point. Is like that literally walked me into the Christian faith. That and Screw Tape Letters. So that's definitely a possibility too. I'll write that down. Maybe have Caleb order us a copy of that. But
maybe there's an annotated version.
Speaking of arrogance, I actually gave away all those books once I started seminary because they weren't theological. And now I regret that because as a pastor, that's the stuff that people always want to talk about.
Yeah. Turns out it's more theological than you thought.
Yeah, well, arrogance of youth and all that stuff. So
wasn't it on one of his essays? Mere Christianity were radio addresses.
Yes, that's right. Excellent. So, maybe we'll do that. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, 1517, for the opportunity to have this platform and have these conversations. Thank you, of course, to all of the listeners, because you're the reason we do this. If you don't know, we're on YouTube. Come and subscribe to the live stream.
And Odyssey. In the event that YouTube fails us.
Otherwise, you can find the Band Pastors Telegram channel. If you can't reach it, just shoot us a text and we'll give you a link. Everywhere else that we're found.
It's in the show notes.
It's in the show notes. There you go. So thanks, everybody. Peace.
We're also on Rumble.
The Great Divorce is good.
Oh, I got to push the right buttons here. There we go. Now I push the right buttons.
Yeah, that's the thing is once you start to dip into, because the one of the folks that drives over an hour to come to church here listened to our episodes on Bunyan.
Really?
And it was like, thank you so much for finally letting me bury him. And we had a good conversation about that because I made the joke.
We were pretty hard on Bunyan.
Well, at the time. But I think we made the comment on the show, if this were written by a Lutheran, it'd be a pamphlet. He'd be standing in his backyard lamenting his sin, and then God would send him a preacher, absolve him, and he'd go back inside and make dinner for his family.
That's true. Yeah.
But he had brought a guest with him who also had come into the Christian faith by way of Lewis, Mere Christianity, Great Divorce, God in the Dock. And so we had a really robust conversation about that. And again, it reminded me that for a lot of people, Lewis is their gateway drug into the Christian faith. And that,
fair enough. I get it.
Yeah, absolutely. And to dismiss him as light lifting or light reading, or, well, he's not orthodox enough or whatever it might be, it's like,
right.
We can't read people that point us in the direction of Christ. He's not even on the front porch. He's at least in the front entryway.
So we did Learning in Wartime.
Oh, yeah.
That was 170, 171. We did a whole series on Lewis, because then we did Bad Philosophy Needs to Be Answered. That was, what was that from? that was also learning in wartime. We spent a lot of time on that essay. We
No
started
kidding.
166 to 172.
I have completely forgotten that we even read that. That's crazy.
Yeah. So that was a series on Lewis, and I don't know why we were reading that. We'd also
What year was
did
that?
166. Well, do the math. It's probably 2 years ago now. I guess. I still was talking about Raised by Wolves on that episode, so all right. That's been out. And we talked Mad Max Fury Road. Look at that.
There we go.
Always post-apocalypse. Then
That's
we
right.
did, let's see, Bondage of the Will. No, here, Lewis. No, that's Pilgrim's Progress. Did we talk about Lewis there? I guess we kept referring to Lewis.
Well, yeah, Pilgrim's Regress. We talked about that.
Oh, we referred to it, but we didn't actually read it. And then we did, from the Joyful Christian, we did The Fall of Man.
Yeah, I remember that. So we
All
never
right.
read Pilgrim's Regress after.
And then we did The Obstinate Toy Soldiers.
Yeah, I remember that. That was good.
And then, yeah, that was it. Looks like.
Nice.
So, I mean, we've done some kind of, I guess.
Off the beaten path stuff.
Yeah.
B-sides. I think we called them that too. It was like the B-sides, the deep cuts.
Well, we were that's where we started the show, is with the
Yeah.
deep cuts. Maybe we should get to the chorus,
Well, I
Not
think
the-
actually most of the stuff that we read this summer was deep cuts too, though. Other than
I
Moby
think.
Dick, I don't think most people are familiar with The Minister's Black Veil or Young Goodman Brown or Revelation.
Right? But Moby
The
Dick
trial,
was the one
sure.
that really popped
Yeah,
as
'cause it's
far
popular.
as analytics. Well,
Yeah.
it was but people appreciated it too for the content,
Yeah, no, 100%.
which was kind of, and that was the episode I looked at the analytics and on YouTube, get 40. The average view length was 40 minutes.
Yeah,
Like
that's
on
cool.
YouTube, really? People, that's uncommon.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it's like 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But so we must have been saying something interesting.
It was also shorter text too.
Was it? We did
Well, it
one
was
episode.
a sermon.
No, we did two.
We did two,
We
but it
did
was a
two.
sermon. It was compact. It wasn't 6 to 10 episodes. It was just
Yeah, but I think we even lamented that. At least I did. That talking about somebody else's sermon is hard. It's hard. It's
Yeah.
harder. Whereas the narrative has been easier because it's all, we can be very reflective then,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Moby Dick, 303 views on YouTube. Look at that. Oh,
Well,
that's
thank
like
you.
all the subscribers watched it.
Nice.
Or something.
I wonder, because I've been thinking about this since we've been doing this series, is in the early church they use a lot of analogies, a lot of metaphors, that kind of stuff. But has anybody ever put together an anthology of that stuff? Like the use of the use of metaphor in the early church, or the use of analogy in the medieval church, that kind of stuff.
Well, I think there's a book on Luther and in particular. I'm just thinking of it by extension with Aesop.
Well,
You
there's
know.
the Line of Judah in Narnia, I think it's called, which is an analysis of C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and their use of
Of
fiction
ancient.
to preach.
But
the
you're talking about
gospel.
going back to the ancient and what are
Yeah.
they using? Yeah, because we've talked about this a lot from New Testament. It's clear they've got,
Yeah, there's
They've
a tradition
got-
there.
well, like Plato and Aristotle are not out of the picture. I mean, they're known.
Mm-hmm. Oh, here. The Line of
So-
Judah in Never Never Land by Catherine Lindskog. I think that's the one. And I read that in 1995.
I don't know this one. I don't know this
96?
one.
I think it was one of those things that I found in the book donations at the mission when I was living there in Mexico.
Okay, all right.
I think that's where I first read it. I'll send you the link right now.
Well, part of the problem too for us, I think, is it's hard to really gauge things because we have so many completists that listen to every episode and they don't mind if they're behind by weeks and weeks and weeks, which is fine
Right.
because we're not really all
Yeah,
that
it was
timely.
first published January 1st, 1973. This was the very first celebration of the Chronicles of Narnia, begun in 1955 before the final volume was published, and is still the only one of its kind. Furthermore, it is the only book about himself and his writings that C.S. Lewis ever praised. The preface is by Walter Hooper. The introductory chapter is called Making Pictures. The three main chapters are Spoiled Goodness, Lewis's concept of nature, The Coming of the Lion, Lewis's concept of God, and Possible Gods and Goddesses, Lewis's concept of man. And then the concluding chapter is called Weaving a Spell. And it had a profound impact on me. Like I said, I read that way back in 95, 96, and I still remember it. Because it breaks down the entire series for Chronicles. It brings in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. It might even bring in Chesterton to a certain extent, but I got to order that.
That would be interesting.
But anyways, there's got to be a tradition in the early church, this teaching tradition where they use this stuff.
Yeah, like all the meta references, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about?
Yeah. Where they're, and they're just using, not even meta references, they're using so many analogies. Like Tertullian, for example, right? The little fishes in the baptismal font. And
so almost like a rhetorical manual, of sorts.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are the rhetorical devices used?
That they're literally looking around at creation and going, this is an analogy for this. This is an analogy for this. And maybe it's rationalism and orthodoxy that kind of killed it, but just that, it's like the Aesop's Fables tradition. Like that tradition of using common everyday things to tell these stories. And the early church obviously did that too. Because I explained to somebody the other day that, like in Irenaeus believed that everything that happened in the Old Testament was consummated in the New Testament. And it's called recapitulation. And so this idea of recapitulation, which Gustav Wenger subscribes to, Gustav Wingren subscribes to because he's an Irenaeus scholar, wrote his dissertation on Irenaeus, is that, like, for example, the tree of life in the garden is where Jesus is crucified at, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And that's Adam, old Adam.
Yeah, that's
Mary
Adam's grave is Jesus' grave.
Right,
and,
right, exactly.
The whole deal.
Again, just from the standpoint of imagination, it's so evocative.
Or that the altar of the temple is actually that's the mountain of Moriah.
Yeah.
The sacrifice of Isaac, the sacrifice of Jesus.
Right. There's got to be a book that is just that just goes, do. It just jumps back and forth between Old and New Testament and just does that. That'd be fantastic.
No, I guess Brown's telling us all the answers here in the chat.
Proto-eptics?
They're called proleptics, I think, or proto-eptics.
Well, there's proleptic eschatology.
It's not prolaptic. That's a different thing.
That's a whole other thing. That's a medical term.
No, but we're talking about pattern recognition, I guess, is what we call it today.
100%, which is why we like it.
Yeah, I did that on Wednesday in the preaching. It's just like, just how striking the compare and contrast is between the two, like the three young men, Daniel, between Nebuchadnezzar and Darius, but then also with John and Herod, and their relationships. And they're not exactly the same. They're not a one-to-one. There's nuance. And actually, if you put them together, you kind of get a bigger picture, a broader picture of like, here's how we interact with these civil rulers, whether they're godly or not. It doesn't even matter. Right. What's our role and what, as preachers in particular. They're not all preachers exactly, but, they are given roles of authority.
Yeah.
The three young men are like in the council or the court of Nebuchadnezzar.
Sure.
Right. They're there to counsel. They're
100%.
part of the wise cohort. So they do have a role, and they, how do they use that? That's something that can be learned there. So the parallelism or the and it's not always a one-to-one. I think that's the other aspect too. But they can be contrasted. Who was the other one we were thinking of? There's just too many examples.
Origin does it.
Well, yeah, but we're Irenaeus. I don't. Maybe he takes it too far, but it's like you can't help but say like Hannah and Mary are
right.
They're direct parallels.
Yeah, I was gonna say if Mary didn't know Hannah's song, that's strikingly, again, it rhymes, to quote Mark Twain. It may not be the same, but it rhymes. Right. It's obvious she's familiar with that tradition.
Well, and their conditions are similar but different, very different. Yeah. Because Hannah also then parallels Elizabeth in that way. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So the story is like, wait a minute, we've heard this story before. We know how this story is going to go.
Well, you've seen that. We posted that meme of all the cross references in the Bible where it shows it in colors.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's literally in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of cross references in the Bible. And it's just like, yeah, that's amazing. So the Bible does it. Paul definitely does it.
This is actually what I suggested. Now that I think about it, in my sermon on Mary here, when was that? On Wednesday? It was probably 2-3 weeks ago now. Mary's August 15th, right? Anyway, so I just said, look, why does she break out in song? Yes, she's filled with the Holy Spirit. Of course, that's what the text says.
Sure.
But she knows her Bible.
Yeah.
It's like, she knows God's word. She's young, yes, fine, whatever. But she's not immature when it comes to God's word. She's like, I've seen this situation before.
But here's the thing. When the angel announces this to her, she's of childbearing age, which means that she's literally in the middle of being bat mitzvahed.
Right.
She's in the middle of being taught God's word.
Oh, no, she's mature enough to have a child, of course. Yes.
Yes. But that's what I'm saying is that we forget that our children who are quote unquote confirmed.
Oh yeah, she's been through catechesis, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
got it.
She's been catechized because that's when you do that. It's a part of the rite of passage. We don't have that rite of passage anymore. Therefore, our children don't like the teaching doesn't match up with the initiation into adulthood for our children.
I gotcha.
And as a consequence,
it's either delayed or it's cut off.
exactly right. Exactly. Which is another thing that Shia talks about in that interview with John Barenthal about we don't have rites of passage for boys anymore. And so they never are actually like, you were a boy, now you're a man. There's no like cutoff where you're starting this new life as a man. And so when you grow up and you become a drug addict, you're in a perpetual state of pubescence, which is why when you do get clean and sober, you may be physically 28, but maturity wise, you're 16. Like emotionally, you're 16.
I mean, there's some. I mean, you've got. I mean, not really driving, but maybe a job. Maybe your first like real job.
That's not a right, man. I'm talking about a right. I'm talking about you go out in the woods. And
ritualistic.
Something.
Yes, right. Okay.
There's a ritual to it. There has to be.
I suppose you had that with scouting to some degree.
Yeah, to some degree you did actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, there still is kind of a strong cultural. What do you want to say? Respect for when you're becoming an Eagle Scout. Something to that.
Yeah.
Sometimes we lose things in the process of our liberation.
Well, yeah. I have to explain to my sweet lady this Sunday that I may have accidentally given away our baptismal banner in my cleaning. Because I looked for it, and turns out I separated it out, and I may have actually put it back into a roll that I donated, and
Threw the baby out with the bathwater.
I did. And I'm always being accused by the old folks at church of throwing stuff out.
And there you did it.
And then I did. Yep.
This is why I have transitions of throwing things out. I take it from one place and I move it to another place normally, right?
It usually takes
and then
me
it sits
3
there
years
for a
to
while.
throw something away. I do the same thing.
Right.
It goes from wherever it's at to my office. It sits in my
so
office.
first it's like, is it going to be missed? So just put it somewhere else and
100%.
see if it's missed. Right. Yeah. It's not passive aggressive. It's just kind of, being very cautious.
I don't think it's important, so I put it on the counter, I put it on the shelf, or I put it on the table. Nobody claims it. I put it in my office. That way, if you come into my office and you see, you're like, hey, nobody does that. Like, literally, it took me 3 years to clean out our church library because I did that. Nobody complained. I donated the books. Not a problem. I replaced all the books with my books. Not a problem. The one time I cleaned out all the banners we haven't used in over 5 years, we never bring them out. We bought new banners, roll them up, getting rid of them, donating them, separate out that one banner because it's the only baptismal banner we have, and it's been there for decades. Yep, that's me. I did it. That's me. I got to own that one. So, yay! Pray for me.
Will do.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.